In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two yet equally important groups, the Lularoe Defective Detectives and the Washington Attorney General, who prosecute offenders Mark and Deanne. This is the Lularoe story. This is the Sounds Like MLM But Okay podcast. We have a very special episode, and I know we say that a lot, but this is a special edition episode. That's why it's coming out on a different day, because we have had some breaking news here in the anti-MLM, in the business world. Can you guess what it is? Oh, and also, Katie's here.
Yes.
Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
And Katie, why don't you introduce the other person that I did not mention?
Yeah, there's actually 3 of us here because we also have Becca Peter here with us.
Becca, how you doing?
Good.
I bet you're really happy about this news.
I am. I had such a good day yesterday.
So, Becca, tell us a little bit about why you're interested in Lularoe, and especially, like, the legal aspect of Lularoe. Like, what's your background? Were you a retailer at one time, or just give us a little taste.
Sure. So, no, I was never a consultant, but I just happened to be in a lot of circles with, like, on Facebook with mommy business owner type groups. And so some of my friends did end up selling Lularoe because for a time it was very popular. It seemed like an easy way to make money.
Knees.
What's that?
Oh, I just said it was the bee's knees.
Sorry. Yeah, so I kind of started following it a bit because I heard a lot about it, but it really came on my radar when they started screwing up sales tax, because they were, for a time, they were charging sales tax based on where the seller lives instead of where the buyer lives, which is not how it works. And so buyers who lived in states with no sales tax were being charged sales tax. And in the business owner groups I was in, women were arguing that Lularoe was doing sales tax correctly and the rest of the internet was doing sales tax wrong. And I was just like,
Is that
what?
That's definitely how it works.
No, it reminds me of that Simpsons quote where oh my gosh, Principal Seymour goes out and he's like, have I really become out of touch? And he said, no, it's the children. It's the children who are wrong.
Yeah, no. It's the
so that was wrong. That was definitely made me more aware of the company, because I was just like, what is this? And then there were issues. They had data breaches where consultants' cards were compromised, and then Lularoe was blaming other companies for that. Like, oh, our website's secure, but this other website that you're using is not secure. And so, other small businesses were getting blamed for Lularoe's data breaches, which to this day they have never acknowledged. So that made me really aware of the company. And then some of my friends who were selling for them were privately like, hey, there's a lot of, sketchy stuff going on here. There's issues with the clothing. And gosh, if you try to ask any questions about it, you just get shut down. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to express any concerns. It just has to be like rainbows and unicorn farts, or else you get kicked out of your groups and shut down.
Now, what made you really interested in especially the leak? Because it's like, I'm interested in looking at the silly, of course, this whole thing. We'll get into why this isn't a special episode in just a second. We haven't told our listeners yet, although some of them may know. What made you really want to focus on the legal side of Lularoe? Is it kind of because it's like you're opening up Pandora's box?
Yeah, it just was of interest to me. I mean, nobody was reporting on this stuff when they first started getting sued. I have some background as a journalist on the side. I cover track and field. I run a website about pole vaulting. And a few years ago, USA Track and Field actually sued some of their volunteers. And as a result, I became familiar with Pacer and downloading the legal filings and following lawsuits. So when Lularoe started getting sued, I started looking up these lawsuits and downloading them and posting them, because nobody knew about this stuff. And at that point, there wasn't really much coverage in the media, so people weren't otherwise hearing about it. I'm not a lawyer. My law background, I took sports law in undergrad and grad school. And that actually, there's some overlap because we touched a lot on torts and contracts and things like that. So I'm definitely not an expert, but just over the years following this stuff and covering it, I've learned a lot.
Right. So this makes you, today, you are our honorary Nancy Grace. You just have to talk a lot louder. And, because, did she have a legal background? Like a little bit? She's a journalist. And, she gives you those hard-hitting facts, and she is sassy about it.
Well, I try. I don't know if I'm sassy, but I am snarky sometimes.
Oh, that's exactly what I want to get into, is there is a wonderful group that, Becca, you help run it, correct? Or you did?
Not anymore. So I did not create the group, but when it was created, I quickly joined. I was a moderator for a few months, basically, and then I got out of that. And I've just focused more on putting out content, reporting on stuff, less interesting to me. So I kind of try to stay out of some of that stuff.
Becca, tell us the name of the group you were in. Or you are in, but,
are in. So it goes by Lularoe Defective. The full name is Lularoe Defective /ripped/torn leggings and clothes. And so it was started by Julie Dean. She had problems with holes in her leggings that appeared almost immediately. And a lot of people were having these problems. And yet, they were getting shut down, and they needed a group where people could talk about the problems they were having with the clothing. And then it quickly evolved into just a place where people could actually talk about problems with the company, because everywhere else, the consultants who were still drinking the Kool-Aid were just shutting people down, and they weren't allowing discussions.
And I'll make sure I put the link in the show notes. It's been very, very busy the last couple days because of what we're about to announce. But Becca does these wonderful things where she does, like, snarky write-ups for things like, I've seen a lot of your write-ups for Deanne Lives, and I've seen a lot of your write-ups for, Patrick or
the
whatever.
Home office updates.
Yeah. Wait, is his name Justin? I don't know. People seem to really like him. And it's just like, it's like looking at The Office if they were all rich and taking Xannies.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I have a lot of fun doing the snarky recaps. I started in the past year, I think, because the home office calls used to be like you could only watch them live. You had to catch it in that exact moment. There was no replay.
Right, and that's why I started.
Few of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now they're pre-recorded and you can watch them anytime, which makes it a lot easier to do the recaps because I can pause and take a minute. And sometimes, the actual things that they say are so ridiculous that sometimes I'll just type up quotes of what they're saying, and that's better than any snarky thing I could put out there.
That's the best part.
Now, if you haven't read Becca's really snarky recaps, which are hysterical, they actually do give me a legitimate guffaw, a nice belly laugh. I believe you are still posting them in Defective, right?
Yes, every week. I try.
Every week. Yeah, no, she is pretty much like clockwork, as much as possible. And I think that it's probably, like, really therapeutic for you, and I think that Defective is probably therapeutic in general, because, yes, you do talk a lot about some very, very heavy stuff, some very depressing stuff, but also a lot of it is, like, your snarky recaps, and look at these hideous leggings, and, oh my god, my leggings just tore in my crotch, and now I've got crotchless leggings. What do I do with this? It's silly stuff like that, and I think that people really find a lot of camaraderie in the humor.
Yeah, it's definitely an entertaining company to cover because, they do a lot of malicious things, but they're also just so out there, and they just say the most ridiculous things that, like, no legitimate business owner would ever say. And it's like, wow, did they really just say that? Yes, they did. Okay.
And it's something, like, it really is something every month. Which brings us to what today's episode is about. Why are we recording on a Saturday, you say? Why am I going to be recording? Or, I'm sorry, why am I going to be editing? for 24 hours? Well, let me tell you. Drum roll, please.
We actually have, like, a lot to talk about because, as we all know and kind of revel in, Lularoe has had a lot of lawsuits brought against them. Like, a lot of lawsuits. What was the total, Becca? Something like 20 or 30 something?
36, though.
It was 36, and so this one will be the 37th lawsuit filed against them in about the past 2 years.
37. So first we're going to kind of recap all of the past lawsuits and talk about some other stuff. And then we're going to get a little bit in depth into the most recent lawsuit, which is, in my opinion, probably the most interesting, maybe, or maybe just the most exciting, I think.
Spit it out.
I don't know, it's hard to say.
Spit it out.
Tell us, what is the most recent lawsuit to be brought against Lularoe?
So the most recent lawsuit to be brought against Lularoe is the state of Washington has filed a lawsuit against Lularoe and against Mark and Deanne, who are the founders of Lularoe. And hilariously, they named Deanne's son Jordan in the lawsuit as well, which I'll get into in a minute. And so this lawsuit it's a little bit confusing for people, but this lawsuit's a really big deal because this is the first one to come from some sort of governmental agency. So all of the lawsuits up until now have been either customers or former consultants or former suppliers of Lularoe. And this is the first one from a governmental agency. So that's a big deal. It's a civil suit. This is not criminal charges. They're not going to get arrested for this stuff. But sorry.
Oh.
But it's a really big deal. I mean, the state has a lot of resources to fight something like this. And just from a PR standpoint, anyone can pretty much sue anyone for anything. And so that's kind of been Mark and Deanne's defense on a lot of these, is just every company gets sued. It's a sign that you're doing well and people are jealous when you start getting lawsuits.
That's just being a proud American.
Right. And so they've basically just tried to say that all of the existing lawsuits are just disgruntled former employees who didn't work their business hard enough, and that all of the other lawsuits were not legitimate. I'm sure they're obviously still going to say that this lawsuit is not legitimate as well. But when it's coming from the state of Washington, you can't make that argument that it's just a disgruntled former employee or something like that, because why would the state of Washington put so much energy into this, unless there was some legitimate reason behind it?
Keep going. I just have I have a quick question. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So why would it be pursued civilly instead of criminally?
I'm not enough of a legal expert to really get into that stuff, but basically the laws that they're accused of violating, these are all civil things. They aren't criminal things, if that makes sense. You'd have to get more.
Kind of. It does kind of make sense, but it seems like, when we go over, it just seems awfully criminal. But I know nothing about the law.
Yeah, and I'm not enough of an expert to explain exactly when does this stuff become criminal versus civil. But hopefully at some point we can get more experts who start commenting on these posts and weighing in with the details as to why they're not just getting thrown in jail or something. But that's just not how our system works. It's just when you're dealing with white collar crimes like this, it's just not taken as seriously as the more blue collar stuff.
Right, of course, white collar, white affluent people with money and connections. The list goes on and on and on. Katie, do you think that there would be any way that we could get Nancy Grace on the show?
I'd like to say yes, but I
Ooh.
I don't think we have quite that much recognition yet. Not quite. Almost.
Well, first of all, the trial would have to start. Second of all, maybe Judge Judy.
Maybe Judge Judy. Judge Judy would be amazing.
Oh
I'd
my
love
gosh.
to talk to Judge Judy.
She'd be yelling at us the whole time, though.
I don't even care. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'd
yell
love
at me.
I'd
love
be
to be yelled at by Judge Judy.
But it is time for us to dig deep and do some Aaron Brockovich shit, and let's get into how this house of cards fell, or maybe a pyramid of cards. I don't know.
So, Becca, you mentioned that there were a lot of issues with Lularoe incorrectly charging sales tax. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, this is what really sort of kicked off their legal troubles. So when people purchase clothing from a Lularoe consultant, they are supposed to be using Lularoe's payment system instead of using PayPal or Square or whatever. And this lets Lularoe track the sales, and it helps them with like the bonuses and stuff as they go through the whole pyramid shaped upline. And so for sales tax is generally based on where the person buying the stuff lives. Lularoe is voluntarily collecting and remitting sales tax for all of the states that charge sales tax on clothing. As they grew, they basically changed their system to charge the sales tax based on where the consultant lives and not the customer. And so this meant that customers in states with no sales tax were suddenly being charged sales tax, which is illegal. So a lawsuit was filed 2017, and it was filed regarding the states with no sales tax. So there are other people who were incorrectly charged, but this lawsuit was specifically about the people who never should have been charged any sales tax, and then they were. It was filed in Pennsylvania, but it was sort of designed to like link in a whole bunch of states. And that there were lots of really interesting depositions and statements by Lularoe, because basically Lularoe collected sales tax illegally for about a year. And they knew they were doing it wrong, and they did it anyway. And in fact, they created this white paper for consultants that basically explained to consultants, like, this is why we're doing it, and trying to convince consultants that they were doing it correctly. So once the lawsuit was filed, like, then they ended up, ultimately they fixed it, and now we think they're doing it correctly, although that's always a little debatable too.
Where was the money going with the sales tax?
Oh, well, that's a great question. It's not public record, like what gets remitted to various states. So I believe Lularoe testified in court that that they've gone back and fixed the sales tax that they were paying to each state. But I'm highly skeptical that they have correctly remitted the sales tax, because if you charge someone the wrong sales tax, like, you still have to pay it correctly to the state. So even though what a lot of customers were doing is they were buying from consultants in tax-free states. So a customer in Washington might buy from a seller in Oregon, and then they weren't charged the sales tax.
Right. That makes sense.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. But, like, Lularoe still owes that sales tax to the state of Washington, even if they failed to charge it to the consumer.
Right.
I am super skeptical that they ever fully fixed that problem. And I doubt that anybody from, like, any state governments are listening, but I would certainly encourage any state that Lularoe is remitting sales tax to take a really serious look at this issue, because I'm very skeptical that they've been remitting their sales tax and their use tax correctly. But I don't know. And unfortunately, I have made efforts to public record request some of this information, and it is not subject to public record request.
Wow.
Knowing how Lularoe is run, this is what I imagine when they do their sales tax. I imagine that there is a file folder on somebody's computer that says, this is how much in total we have earned from sales taxes, and then they just kind of relocate the funds to the states where they're supposed to be paying them, regardless of where they came from.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's
Lulamath.
really just speculation.
Lulamath.
I mean, well, and I know in my state, Washington State, like, it's not just how much you give the state, but every like county, every city, like, they're all separate taxing jurisdictions, and so it's actually a huge pain to remit the sales taxes, because I have a small business here, and I sell online, so I don't have that many in-state transactions per year, but it still is like a very long, tedious process for me. And so for a large company, I mean, that's what you pay people to do. But yeah, so anyway, so this lawsuit was filed, and the judge, so they had about a year of like back and forth with motions and depositions and testimonies and all this stuff. Ultimately, the judge ruled that it was too complicated because I mentioned that it included multiple states, and every state has like slightly different laws about this stuff.
Right.
So this judge in Pennsylvania didn't want to try to rule on this lawsuit that was affecting like 9 states. I don't remember how many it was, but and it was a little frustrating because it took him like 6 months to decide this. So there was just like nothing for 6 months, and then he finally.
That must be so frustrating.
Yeah. So he did not rule on the merits of the case. Like, Lularoe has been saying, "Oh, we won this lawsuit." Like, they didn't win this lawsuit. The judge kind of just got lazy and said, "Oh, this is too hard." So,
our judicial system at work.
Yeah. So the attorneys for that lawsuit, they went ahead and refiled in 3 states: Alaska, Montana, and New York. And now those lawsuits are working their way through the system. And so Lularoe has subsequent. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna mention. So you said how they were not really paying when they were charging sales tax. They were charging it to the seller instead of the buyer, and I would venture to guess that what contributes to that is with most MLMs, they don't keep track or care who the end customer is. So for a lot of them, the end customer is the retailer.
Yeah, so they weren't charging it to the retailer. They were still charging the tax to the end consumer, but yeah, it was the rate of the retailer instead of the rate of the customer.
Right.
But
because
yeah,
what happens is the retailer purchases it. So to the company, it's like basically the retailer is the end consumer. So, if the retailer is in a state where there's sales tax, charge it to them because they're ordering the product and then reselling it.
Yeah, it's so what a lot of MLMs do is they charge the consultant at the time they purchase the product. They charge them the sales tax. But Lularoe doesn't do that. So they don't charge it until there's an actual end sale. But you're right, a lot of other MLMs do that. But I think mostly the companies that do that tend to be a little less inventory heavy. And really the big difference with Lularoe is their products are just so much more expensive. Like, I'm sure you guys have touched on this in other podcasts, but it's more expensive products, and then they're expected to carry this huge amount of inventory.
Yeah.
And so, if a different company that sells like mascara or lipstick, if they charge the sales tax up front, it's not quite as predatory as if like Lularoe were to do that.
You are right, though. Most of the companies that I'm thinking of, I mean, I can't think of another company off the top of my head where they're basically forced to keep stock or as much stock as Lularoe. So you're right in that, yeah, what I'm thinking is companies where, like, say Mary Kay, somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to place an order, tell me what you want," and then they place the order, and Mary Kay just assumes, okay, this order is going to the seller, but then it's going to the end consumer. So they don't really keep track of it. They just assume it's going to somebody else.
Yeah, and those types of consultants tend to do a lot more in-person business.
Yeah.
Whereas Lularoe, I mean, they do push the in-person sales, but ultimately so many of their consultants that were really successful were successful because of their online presence. And there's a lot of consultants that they never do anything in person. They always sell online, and then they're shipping products all over the country. And that's where, and from a tax standpoint, it's definitely different. Lularoe has like a wholesale retail arrangement with their consultants. And then the customers are all over the country. And that's different than like some companies will just drop ship to the customers, and then that works out a little different. So there's 3 lawsuits that are currently ongoing now for the sales tax. They're still pretty early in the process. I mean, they should move a little faster just because they've already had a lot of the depositions. Like, kind of the facts of the case have already been hashed out in the previous lawsuit. So it shouldn't take quite as long to get to the point this time. Lularoe did end up, allegedly, they refunded everyone who was overcharged on sales tax.
Allegedly.
So what they did is, if you lived in a state where like you never should have been charged any sales tax, then they issued refunds to the cards that people paid with. And so they didn't give any notifications to the customers. These refunds just randomly appeared, sometimes like a year later. And people were, pretty confused, like, what the heck, what's going on? Because it wasn't like a full refund. It was just a few dollars that they paid for sales tax. And so a lot of people never even noticed that happened. And most customers just didn't keep that good of records. And they have no idea if they ever received all of the refunds they should have received. So what Lularoe is arguing in court is that them refunding the customers is superior than the legal action that is being sought. But in some of these states, they have actual laws that allow like penalties to be issued if you improperly charge sales tax like this. So the lawyers that filed the lawsuit are arguing that it's not enough for Lularoe to just refund the sales tax like a year after the fact, that they should have to pay some sort of monetary punishment beyond this because they knew they were improperly charging sales tax. Like, they had the Minnesota attorneys general contacted them not long after they started doing this and was like, "Hey, you are breaking the law by charging sales tax to Minnesota customers." So
and they were just like, "Yeah,
definitely,
whatever."
Yeah, pretty much. It was really bad. And when this was going on, like, so many customers and consultants contacted Lularoe, like, "Hey, this isn't right. My customer wants a refund," or customers were even seeking refunds, and the majority of people did not get those when they requested it. The other thing that Lularoe did was, people who were overcharged sales tax, like maybe your sales tax rate is 5%, but you bought from a consultant with like a 10% sales tax rate, and so you paid too much in sales tax. Those refunds were issued. It was super sketchy. It was like everybody got an email, and it's this like brand new company called Checkbook, and they had these like digital checks. They could direct deposit into your bank account, which people were a little skeptical to give Lularoe their bank account information.
Right.
Not surprisingly.
Yeah. Or you could get this digital check that you had to like print yourself, and some people were able to deposit those via their phone if they have like a mobile checking app. But most people, like, if they took them into a bank, the banks are not accepting those. And a lot of people were concerned about the checks bouncing. because that has happened to some people before.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these refund checks were like small amounts, like less than $1 or a few dollars. And so people didn't want to risk depositing that money and then get hit with like a $30 bounce check fee or something.
Right.
So we have so this was like millions of dollars that was overcharged. And it's not clear, but we know in the latter case where people were charged a higher rate than they should have been, we know that a lot of people did not claim that money, and Lularoe has not accounted for what happened to the money that wasn't claimed. I know for Washington State, they are legally obligated to remit that to the state. Who knows if they have actually done that. But yeah, so that kind of covers. Oh, the other thing I was going to say on the refunds that went back to credit cards, if people no longer had the credit card they had paid with, or like they paid with like a prepaid card or something, for the majority of those people, like Lularoe never gave them another refund. So even those people, not all of them received their refunds.
Man.
Yeah.
So let's, excuse me. There's a lot of them. So let's kind of briefly go over the very tasty variety of lawsuits that have been brought up against Lularoe.
Yeah, so as far as I know, Lularoe has been sued 36 times in the past 2 years, and that does not count small claims court. And there's always the chance there's other lawsuits I just haven't been able to find. Because when stuff gets filed at the local level, like I have to know to look there. So of course I've looked at the area close to Lularoe, but sometimes there's some random ones in other places. But yeah, so some of those lawsuits have wrapped up, but overall it's a ton. And so the sales tax lawsuits, that's 4 of the 36. The next category of lawsuits are copyright lawsuits. So far they've been sued 7 times for copyright infringement, but honestly, the problem there is enormous. Like basically, as far as we can tell, Lularoe was just like Google searching the internet and just like taking artwork and using it left and right, and then they're trying to claim fair use, but they haven't. If you change enough of an artwork, then you can legally use it sometimes, but they're like taking stuff and not changing it at all. We are aware of other settlements that they've made, like where there was never a lawsuit, but the artist contacted them and is like, hey, you stole my artwork. So they've had some other monetary settlements for that. We also saw they stole like a picture of Evel Knievel, and they put that on the Americana clothing last year.
I remember
last
that.
summer. Yeah, and so the Evel Knievel family, like they were contacted, and then they contacted Lularoe, and I think Lularoe paid them off, and then they're like, oh, we have this collaboration with them, and they tried to play it off like it was intentional, but like, no, they just stole that artwork and then presumably paid out to have the rights after the fact.
Yeah, some of the artwork that they stole was a little bit obscure, but they took some artwork that was like the Evel Knievel that was really, really obvious.
Yeah, and so there's 2 women. They made a Facebook page called Derivative Lularoe, and it's a page, not a group. And so they've really been working to find the original creator of the artwork. And so they've contacted quite a few artists to let them know that their work was stolen. Unfortunately, a lot of the artists are just like shrugging their shoulders because it happens a lot, and they just don't feel like they have the money to go after them.
Right.
And some of them it's hard to know because there's a lot of websites you can legally purchase artwork from, and to use it for commercial purposes like Lularoe is, you would have to pay the appropriate licensing fees. And so we can't prove that they didn't do that, if that makes sense. Like, it's possible that they legally purchased some of the artwork, but so far every individual artist that has been contacted has said, like, no, they never purchased this from me. Like, they have yet to contact a single artist who's like, oh yeah, like Lularoe licensed this artwork from me, it's totally cool. No one has ever said that.
Really? Nobody has ever said that?
No, of all the people they've contacted, they've never found one that Lularoe appropriately licensed it. There are a few artists who, like, they have their stuff on Shutterstock, like they have their artwork all over a bunch of websites. So there were a few artists who were kind of like, oh, I don't know, it's on all the websites, I don't know. But my guess, based on what we've seen, is that when Lularoe was at its peak, they were just putting out this tremendous amount of product, and they had very unreasonable expectations of their graphic designers. And so they just had to crank out the prints as fast as they could.
Right.
And so I think that's part of why so much of it was stolen. But that's also part of why there's just so much like ugly, geometric, random, hideous stuff. If you don't give your artists enough time to create good artwork, I think some of that is the result.
Yeah, definitely. And we had heard at one point what they were expecting from their designers, and like you said, it was just absolutely absurd the amount of designs that they were expected to churn out in a day, and you just can't expect people to be able to work like that. I mean, it was something like several hundred in a day that they were supposed to be creating.
Right. Like, they don't have a good appreciation of what it takes to properly run a company of their size and success level. And so they weren't investing in competent employees that could do a good job. They were just trying to make as much money as they could, as fast as they could. And so this is an example of an area that suffered.
Yeah, I feel like they were expecting, once they really grew, they were expecting to be able to run the company the same as they did when it was just Deanne in her basement making clothes. Right. And that's not at all how it works. And how long has the company been around? Something like
6 years?
Like
about
6 or 7 years?
Yeah, they just celebrated their 5th birthday, but technically I think we're actually at their 6th anniversary. They're so weird about everything. Like, they've decided that their birthday is in May, I believe. But the company was actually started in January 2013. And if you use the Wayback Machine at archive.org, like, you can see their website. Like, you can see when the company was registered. You can see that they had a website back then and they were selling product. So I don't know.
The thing about it,
lie about that.
yeah, because they're weird. The thing about it is that they still, when they have problems, they still to this day try to claim growing pains. Oh, well, this kind of thing is going to happen. We're going through some growing pains. And it's like, you've been doing this for 6 years. You shouldn't still be having growing pains.
Well, and I also feel like that maybe they decided that their birthday was in May because there's no holidays around in May. Like, you can do a capsule or whatever in May, like this is our birthday capsule versus, in January you got your New Year's capsules. It just makes it's another way to do heavy inventory loading, but that way you don't have to combine it with another holiday like Valentine's Day or St. Patrick's Day or any other.
Well, yeah. I say you shouldn't still be having growing pains. It's different for an actual small business that at 6 years is exploding the way that Lularoe did 3 years ago. But the things that they claim growing pains about are things that it's definitely like, no, this is not growing pains. This is you being incompetent. And like with their capsule releases, where they do the same thing every time, and then thousands upon thousands of people are upset because they didn't get any stock. And they're like, oh, we're going through some growing pains. Like, you just did this 2 months ago. You should know what you're doing by now.
Right. It's one of my big challenges with this company is trying to figure out, is this incompetence or is this fraud? Because it really could go either way on a lot of things. And we may never have all the answers to that. But so the next category of lawsuit is the defective product lawsuits. And this was really this was the big one that got in the news. And this was, like you guys mentioned before, this was the thing that started the Defective group on Facebook. Lularoe got really popular really fast. And there was just a fad around leggings. and Lularoe had these buttery soft leggings, and a lot of people loved them. And the first ones were usually like good quality and fun prints, and it was just kind of this fun, exciting, different thing to try. But then as they increased production, something went wrong. And all of a sudden, like, the leggings were getting holes. Like, everybody was getting holes, and it wasn't because they were too small, although the amount of body shaming that went on was just ridiculous.
Yeah. And we talked about that with in our episode when we interviewed Courtney Harwood and the struggle that she went through with all of the body shaming that goes on in the company, clear up to Deanne.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so Julie Dean, who started the Defective group, she was actually the first one to file a lawsuit about the defective products. Ultimately, there were 5 lawsuits filed, and they ended up getting consolidated. And Julie's no longer named on the lawsuit. Like, the Defective group getting so big, I think, kind of, it ended up being better to take her off of the lawsuit. So it's a proposed class action lawsuit, and it's been dragging on for a few years. Lawsuits take forever, and this is taking forever. I mean, it took probably about a year or so to get everything consolidated properly and to sort that out. And then there's just been a lot of motions and stuff. So currently, there's a motion to dismiss it, and the judge is going to rule on that at some point. I'm not super optimistic that anything is going to happen from this, just because this is really hard to prove in a legal sense. But we'll see. I mean, it's definitely still ongoing. It hasn't been dismissed. It's just taking forever. But yeah, that's certainly been something that Lularoe has had to invest a lot of resources into fighting. And that was really the first like public thing that was negative about them. Because up until that point, when this hit the news, there'd been so much positive media attention, and everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid, and everybody just thinks Lularoe's amazing. And then once this lawsuit got in the news, it kind of started to open the door for people to be able to talk about it. And to start to realize, hey, maybe there's some problems here.
And was Lularoe being difficult about defective product returns a big factor in these lawsuits?
Oh, definitely, because they make it really hard for the consultants to return anything to them, and so the consultants really don't want to take returns from the customers.
Well, because that comes right out of their pocket.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and returns have just been a nightmare for consultants. And I think, I mean, even if they send the returns back to Lularoe, like, a lot of times they just get sent more defective products. So as a result of the defective product lawsuits, Lularoe created the Make Good policy, and they also created a happiness policy. And I think Make Good, I would always get them mixed up, but I think Make Good was for a limited time only, and it was intended to be, an opportunity for customers who receive leggings that got holes right away to be able to get a refund.
What is the name of it? Make Good?
Make Good.
Make Good. Oh,
like
gosh.
If you make good.
Yeah, Make
Sasha,
Good.
You're
yeah.
recording, right?
Yep, I am.
Okay, just making sure. You just came back so quickly.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of I think the main reason they probably did this was to try and reduce the chances of the lawsuit going anywhere, because then because one of the things in the lawsuit was like, oh, these customers couldn't get refunds. And so now Lularoe's like, what are you talking about? We refunded them, which is pretty much what they did in the sales tax lawsuit too. But it didn't go well. Like, they didn't implement it very well, and it was kind of a mess. And I think some people got refunds that weren't supposed to, and then some people who should have gotten refunds, I'm not sure if they all did, and I'm not even sure if everybody knew about it or applied or whatever. But yeah, that was kind of Lularoe's solution to these lawsuits. So we'll see. It's still ongoing in the court, and you never know what's going to happen there. So we'll have to stay tuned on that one.
God.
Yeah. So the next category of lawsuits being filed against Lularoe are lawsuits from the workers in the warehouses that they have. Um, and so a bunch of these, there's 8 of these lawsuits total. 5 of them are kind of the same. They're basically saying that, people didn't get proper lunch breaks, they weren't paid properly for overtime. And a number of them were filed at different times in different counties, and most of them have been consolidated. It takes time to sort out, but California has really strict employment laws. So that's definitely one that Lularoe could end up having to pay out a lot of money for.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
they're,
yeah.
because I know the courts take those really seriously. So they're kind of, even though it's been a while since the first one was filed, just getting things consolidated and kind of moving forward. That I think Lularoe's trying to argue that it should go to arbitration. But with this type of lawsuit, I'm not sure. I don't think they're going to be able to get out of it that easily. So we'll see how those go. They had one lawsuit from a worker that was injured at the warehouse and then ended up basically getting fired, because alleging that they got fired because they got hurt. And then 2 really terrible lawsuits. One of them was the racism lawsuit. And I mean, this guy was just subject to really blatant, aggressive racism. And that one, I have these posted in Defective, but that one actually, I think like BuzzFeed and a couple other outlets picked up on it. And then the other lawsuit is a sexual harassment lawsuit. And that one's really terrible too. I had to put a trigger warning on it in Defective, which I was not anticipating needing a trigger warning for covering Lularoe lawsuits.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, but just the behavior, it seems like it didn't quite rise to a criminal level of behavior, but really terrible treatment of this worker. So I have the details on that posted in Defective too. I won't get too far into that right now. But yeah, so the warehouse worker lawsuits are eight of the lawsuits, and I think most of them are ongoing. I think they're all still ongoing. We'll see if they end up maybe settling some of these. I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't try to settle the racism one and the sexual harassment one, but I guess we'll see what happens.
So much for making good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, from what I've heard, working for them in any capacity is generally pretty terrible.
Like everything from being a consultant to being in the warehouse to working in the home office, et cetera, et cetera. It's all pretty terrible.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anywhere in that company you could work where it wouldn't just absolutely suck.
Unless you were Deanne or Mark.
Yeah.
Or one of their kids.
Going to La Farmacia,
Well, they even had issues with one of the kids, didn't they?
Yes. Deanne's son, Alex, was managing the warehouse in the beginning, and there was a lot of really sketchy stuff going on there. It's a little unclear. There's no lawsuits or anything. There were some allegations, and then the consultant who made those retracted those allegations. But it sounds like I have heard from multiple people that you could just pay, you could bribe him to go to the warehouse and get good stuff, or, making sure you got good stuff in your orders. That was, roughly 2016, maybe early 2017 that he was there, or probably even going back to 2015. So yeah. So then there's one random lawsuit. It's a personal injury lawsuit. Deanne had a party at her house, for consultants, and she brought in some workers to serve food and that sort of thing. And one of those workers slipped and fell and was injured, and is now suing Mark and Deanne and Lularoe. And that lawsuit was super confusing because the dates and locations were kind of all over the place. But after a number of filings, I finally figured out there was finally enough detail to kind of figure out when and where it was. And I did actually talk to a consultant that was at that party and had knowledge that one of those workers had slipped and fallen. So I don't know. That one may not go anywhere, and like they've countersued, and I don't think that's going to be a big lawsuit, but it is just another thing that they have to fight. And then the big ones from consultants. So there have been 7 lawsuits filed by consultants. 6 of them were consolidated, and those were the ones that were all over the news, alleging that Lularoe is a pyramid scheme, suing about the changes to the buyback program, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, the judge upheld the arbitration clause in the contract. And so those lawsuits got sent to arbitration. Last I heard, they were trying to arbitrate as a class instead of making each consultant arbitrate individually, because that would just be cost prohibitive. And I'm not sure. Unfortunately, arbitration it's not public, and I haven't talked to any of those lawyers in a while, so I have no idea where that's at. But I don't think anything's really happened, because if something good had happened, we would have heard about it. So that's super frustrating that those lawsuits didn't seem to go anywhere. The other really big one that was filed by a consultant is super weird. So, like, I'm
You've
pretty
piqued my
sure
interest.
that this is, yeah, I am utterly convinced. I mean, this is my personal theory, but I am utterly convinced that this is a fake lawsuit. I mean, it's a real lawsuit that was filed, but here's the deal. So, some random consultant. I mean, she really was a consultant, and I believe someone said they saw her on a cruise qualified list, but like, I don't think she sold online. Like, she doesn't seem to have any online presence. She filed a lawsuit against Lularoe claiming that they incorrectly classified them as independent contractors when they really should have been classified as employees. And that's a really big deal in California. As I mentioned before, California has like super strict employment laws. So this would be a big problem for Lularoe if there was merit to a lawsuit like this. But the reasons that I personally think this whole thing was a setup. So first of all, it was filed in a really random county, San Benito County. It wasn't filed down where Lularoe is. So usually when people are suing them, they file in Riverside County.
Right.
This is in some random county, and it happens to be one of the only counties in California that does not have court records online.
Wait, really?
So,
I'm in California.
yeah.
I didn't know that about San. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So they don't have any online court records. The only things they post, like they'll kind of post the docket of like what cases are upcoming, but there's no way to search what's been filed or request records. You have to get like documents from them, you have to either physically go there in person, or you have to literally mail them a blank check, because you won't know. They charge per page on the documents, but like there's no way of knowing how many pages each document is, and so you just have to mail them a blank check if you want to like do a records request from them. And then the weird thing is she sued several parties, including Lularoe and LLR. But she also sued, the first party that was sued was Hud Sloan Enterprises. And Hud Sloan Enterprises is a company that Lularoe set up pretty early in their history. And they were involved with the manufacture of clothing. Because before Lularoe exploded, they were actually making a lot of the clothing in the USA, in Los Angeles. And so they created a company that was involved with that side of things. But consultants never had any knowledge of that. So it doesn't, and it wouldn't have had anything to do with consultants, because like that side of the business didn't interact with consultants at all. So for a consultant, a random no-name consultant, to name them in a lawsuit is like probably one of the biggest red flags. because that just doesn't make any sense. Like, consultants didn't have a relationship with Hudson Enterprises. 99.9% of consultants at that point had like no knowledge that Hudson was a thing. And of course, Hudson is two of Deanne's grandchildren, Hudson and Sloan. And that's where the name Hudson comes from.
Oh man, all these portmanteaus of all these names. It's so obnoxious. Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, so this lawsuit was filed in July of 2017. No one knew it was filed. We did eventually get to read the lawsuit because luckily I was saved from having to send them a blank check. One of the lawyers in the pyramid scheme lawsuits, he sent an employee like physically to this courthouse to get these documents. And then he like scanned them and posted them in Defective. So that was tremendously helpful. But the lawsuit itself is like, it's super weak. Like, I think the main reason she was even claiming that they should have been classified as employees was like, oh, because we had to wear Lularoe or something like that.
Like, I had to wear my Lula
uniform.
suits. My Lula suit to work every day. Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's just not a very compelling argument.
Right. Like, if you had like a whole list of reasons, you would definitely, like, that's the type of thing you would include. But it's a little bit of a stretch. Like, I mean, for the most part, like, it wasn't in writing that they had to wear Lularoe. It's just more of like upline, common sense, and then upline saying stuff. But proving it for this type of purpose would be a little more difficult. And if you're going to file a lawsuit like this, like, there's so many other things that they have done that would make a stronger argument for an employee-employer relationship. Like, oh, you have to go to leadership if you want to get your bonus check.
Right.
Like, or you have to attend, like, maybe she mentioned something about the weekly home office calls on there. I'm not sure. But I mean, those weren't mandatory to watch either.
Right.
I mean, they're worth mentioning, but it isn't the strongest argument in the world. If I do think there is validity to a lawsuit like this, but like, the actual lawsuit that was filed was not impressive. And the law firm that filed it, like, I don't even think they normally deal with these types of lawsuits. Like, it was a really random law firm, which was also super fishy. But then the number one reason why, like, clearly, in my opinion, this lawsuit was super fake is because Lularoe, they didn't even try to fight it. They just immediately offered a settlement. And that doesn't make any sense because it was such a weak lawsuit. And like, nobody offers a settlement immediately. Like, if nothing else, you're going to drag it out and fight it because they probably could have fought it for at least a year or two and then offered a settlement if it looked like it was going anywhere.
Right.
And plus, like, and lawyers usually, they like to get paid, right? So if you fight this for a year or two, you're going to rack up like a lot of legal bills and get paid. So, I mean, there was zero attempt to fight it, like no motions to dismiss. I mean, it was just filed and then a settlement was offered within, I think, a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And so that's when we first heard about the lawsuit, was because consultants in California received notice in the mail that they had this settlement offer because it was a class action lawsuit on behalf of consultants in California. And so people who received that notice had a choice. They could accept the money, or they could decline it and like actually respond, or they could ignore it. And if they accepted the money or they ignored it, then they lose their right to ever make any claims against Lularoe for this sort of thing.
Right.
For these employment related claims. For their like classification of whether or not they should have been independent contractors. So, of course, Lularoe told all of the consultants that they should just ignore it. I mean, they told active consultants, like, if you accept this settlement, that will terminate your contract with us, which I mean, that kind of makes sense to say that. But it also means that the majority of consultants in California either accepted the money or ignored it. But there weren't that many people that replied and like declined it. So it
They
means
really just kind of backed them into a corner.
Well, it could have been like a preventative thing. Like if Lularoe thought that they had violated this law, then by having the settlement out there, it means that like they're never going to be on the hook for it, basically, because the penalties you can face in California for violating these laws are huge. Because they could have potentially owed like wages and all kinds of other stuff to all of these consultants. So even though they spent millions of dollars on a settlement, potentially they could have been on the hook for way more than that. So I think there's a motivation for Lularoe to create a fake lawsuit like this.
That's what I was going to say. Here's my conspiracy theory. They hired somebody to bring this lawsuit against them so that they could just be like, okay, we're just going to settle this here and now, and we're going to give you the option to either join this lawsuit or never be able to sue us again. And if you join the lawsuit, we're terminating your contract. So they're basically creating their own honeypot.
And filing in what county was it?
San Benito.
Yeah, San Benito, yeah.
Right. Like, what the heck?
That is really interesting.
Yeah. So obviously, like, I can't prove that, but the person who files the lawsuit, they get a bigger cut. So, I mean, for most consultants, like, it wasn't that much money they got, like a few hundred. It was based on how much product you had ordered from Lularoe. So the bigger of a consultant you were, the more you were entitled to in the settlement. And so, I mean, for the people that did accept it, like they did get their checks, as I believe. I'm pretty sure they all got their checks, and it was, you know, a nice little extra amount of money. I'm certainly not going to fault anybody who accepted the settlement, because the odds are that like there's never going to be a lawsuit, because for the lawyers, they're not going to have enough people to make a big enough class at this point to make a class action worth it. That's my theory. So, I mean, if people accepted the settlement, like, I think that's fine. If they kept their options open, that's fine too. You never know what's going to happen. But if you ignored it, like most of the active consultants did, then you have the worst of both worlds, because you didn't get the money and you still can't ever, you've closed your options for ever suing them about this in the future.
Right.
So,
God, what a mess.
Right. So, I mean, that's just my conspiracy theory. You know, take it with a grain of salt, but there is a lot of suspicious circumstances around that lawsuit.
For sure. The MyDyer lawsuit.
Yeah, and I'll just touch briefly. So the last category of lawsuits, there's been 4 breach of contract lawsuits. 2 of them were from former mentors, and they've been sent to arbitration. They did have a pretty significant one with their former payment processor, and they ended up settling out of court for that. But that was kind of a big one. But yeah, so the most recent one is definitely like the biggest and most damning out of all of these 36 lawsuits.
The most exciting.
Yes, this is definitely the most exciting and interesting. I mean, I really enjoy a lot of the stuff in the sales tax lawsuit, but this one is probably the most exciting to the largest number of people. But yeah, so Lularoe, like once they started getting big, they contracted with a company called MyDyer for the manufacture of their clothing. And so MyDyer works with like all these factories all over the world, and they sort of handle the logistics. So Lularoe would just tell MyDyer, here's what we want to make, and then MyDyer would work out the nuts and bolts of like which factories are we going to use, communicating with those factories, that sort of thing, which is kind of nice for a company to do, because it's a lot of work to find a good factory, and you have to like, I mean, for bigger companies, you really have to travel out there regularly to check on things. You know, you want to make sure they're not using like children in the factory.
Right.
You want to make sure the quality's still good. Like there's all kinds of stuff that can happen with overseas production. So it totally makes sense to work with a company, and especially for Lularoe, where they don't have a strong background. I mean, Mark comes from construction, and Deanne really just sold these like little girls' dresses that she bought from a US company. So there wasn't a lot of experience within the company working with these overseas manufacturers. So MyDyer took care of all of that stuff and brought a level of competence to the table, which was good. A lot of the quality issues, though, I think really my theory is that a lot of the quality issues came back to the designs that Lularoe was using, and probably also just their desires to cut corners and keep their costs low. And so even though MyDyer is like a good, competent company, if Lularoe is telling them to produce garbage, then they're going to produce garbage.
Yeah, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Right. So they had a relationship for a few years, and Mark, I don't know their current friendship status, but he certainly was very close friends with one of the executives at the company named Dan Kang. They both own expensive cars together, and they used to do all sorts of stuff together. I'm kind of assuming they don't, but Dan is actually like conspicuously absent from this lawsuit. But yeah, so the lawsuit is alleging that Lularoe owes them like tens of millions of dollars. Basically, they were ordering more and more product, like everything was so hot and selling so fast. But when Lularoe changed their structure from bonuses, so bonuses used to be based on what people were ordering instead of what people were selling. And so Lularoe was doing really, really well because, like you guys mentioned before, the consultants were the end consumer, and the uplines got bonuses based on what their downlines would buy. And so they're just pushing buy, 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 buy. And at first it worked out well. Like, I mean, in the very beginning, Lularoe was very popular and the clothing was selling and everybody was making money. But then the whole market just got super oversaturated. There were way too many people selling it, and the prints just got like uglier and uglier. And a lot of the designs of their products like are not that great. And so
and the ones that are good are stolen.
Right. Well, and even like, and not just the prints, but also like the Carly dress. It's just like a long t-shirt looking thing with this ugly pocket. It looks like a nightshirt. And so the number of women who want to wear that type of dress, at some point you're going to kind of hit your limit of how many people want to wear that type of thing. And then of course, like the leggings were a big fad that was really popular. And then eventually like that fad kind of died out, especially when the quality went bad. So it's more or less not entirely legal to run your MLM company that way. And so Lularoe was getting pressure to change to a more legal business structure. And so they changed the bonuses from being based on ordering product to being based on what product is actually selling. And all of a sudden, like at that point, I mean, so many of these consultants were already overloaded with inventory. And that's when a lot of consultants started exiting the business and sales just really started slowing down and people weren't ordering as much from Lularoe. But of course, like Lularoe had all these big orders in with the factories, and then all of a sudden the cash flow is starting to dry up. And they implemented this buyback program to buy back inventory from consultants going out of business, which some states mandate that you do that, but Lularoe kind of went above and beyond. Because where it is required, they only have to do it at 90%. But Lularoe was buying back at 100%. And so quickly, like they went from being this huge, explosive, successful company to like all of a sudden the cash flow is starting to dry up. And so in terms of paying MyDyer, payments started getting later. They were like canceling orders. There was just all kinds of crazy shenanigans going on. And that is outlined in the lawsuit. And probably the juiciest part of the lawsuit is that Patrick Wingett, I don't know how to say his name, their designer, their hotshot designer.
He was like celebrity status at Lularoe. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like the most ridiculous thing, which I'll get into later. But yeah, he left the company. I mean, I don't know if he left or they fired him, but whatever. He left and he turned on them and he testified in the lawsuit, and it's pretty juicy. So what MyDyer was trying to do when they filed it was they were trying to get the courts to immediately basically seize control of Lularoe's assets and place like a guardian in charge of everything, and just make sure that they didn't flee the country with all the money, because Mark has literally threatened to do that. Unfortunately, the courts did not rule in their favor on that. They did not rule in MyDyer's favor, but that's like a really, really hard thing to accomplish. And this is like a huge, complicated lawsuit. And so a lot of it is that the judge didn't feel comfortable ruling on something so quickly, because the judge basically like showed up to court and here's this huge lawsuit, and like the judge hadn't even like really read the lawsuit yet. And it happened, like that phase of things happened really quickly. But that was just a motion that was denied. The actual lawsuit is ongoing. And so they have a bunch of hearings coming up in about 2 weeks. And a new judge has been assigned to the case. So yeah, that's going to be super interesting.
So let's talk a little bit more about Patrick, because he's a very interesting person.
Yeah, he's quite an enigma for sure.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research on Patrick because, like, there were these graphics that have been floating around making all these claims about Patrick, and he used to work for all these different big companies, and he was so famous and blah, blah, blah. And, like, I couldn't verify any of that stuff. What I did find is Patrick's about my age. I'm 36, and he's roughly that same age. So he probably graduated high school around 2000-ish, and then I think he might have gone to like a design school or art school or something along those lines. So around 2003, he and a friend started a denim company in Los Angeles, and so he really did have a line of denim. I believe Patrick's dad is like this famous motivational speaker who's written a bunch of annoying books.
Annoying books.
Larry Winget. He's appeared before at Lularoe convention. So Patrick is his son. And so I think his dad and some of his friends like invested in this denim company. And they were pretty like, it was very high end boutique type stuff. That was their market. I have found there's just a few random articles I found that mentioned them, different suppliers they were working with, that sort of thing. I have found a few pictures of the jeans, and it was men's denim. I don't think he ever really did women's. And the one like particularly noteworthy feature is that the zipper, like on the fly, instead of going straight up and down, it was like diagonal.
What?
How does that work?
I don't know. So I've posted pictures of that before in the Defective Facebook group if anybody wants to see. Yeah, they were kind of interesting. I don't know. So I don't have a ton of detail on that company. Like the website was all like using Flash, and so I've tried the Wayback Machine, and like I couldn't get anywhere on the website because it wasn't the type of thing that it had crawled. But he did that for a few years, and then the story I heard is that like supposedly they got sued by another denim company for like stealing their design. But I never found that lawsuit, so I cannot confirm that that's true. The other story I heard is that they just basically, they weren't successful financially after a few years. The money ran out, and the investors pulled out and everything. So then Patrick's next job is super hilarious. He and like a different friend, they started a bike company, and they made these like hipster fixie bikes, I guess. Like they don't have brakes, and I guess that's a thing.
And
like,
yeah, they're like one speeds too, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about bikes, but I have learned a little bit from researching this. So I guess that's a thing, and he made these bikes, and the name of the company was Red You're Dead.
What?
And And they spelled your like Y-O-U-R and not like, but it should have been like Y-O-U apostrophe R-E.
Right.
Read your
Dead.
Yeah. No. I'm trying to process, like, this is like your death, but you're also red. It's like they took the better dead than red slogan from,
It
the
might
1950s.
have
Yeah.
been. It might also be like if you're on a bike with no brakes and you get to a red light, then maybe you're dead.
No, but that'd still be you are dead.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just trying to figure out why they called it that in the first place.
I think he's just not a good speller.
Katie, make sure you're talking into the mic.
Sorry.
Yep. Gotcha. Anyway.
Here's what's happened. Here's what happened. So that was like their company name, and they printed up, labels for the bikes and like water bottles and stuff like that. And then as they got going, I think someone finally pointed out to them that like they spelled it wrong. And so they tried to play it off like, oh, it's red, you are dead, like the letter R instead of the word R. And so in the logos that they made later, like they capitalized the R and they tried to make it kind of a separate thing. But in their first logos, like it was clearly the word your and not like you are. So, yeah. So that he did that for several years, and I don't think that was ever super successful either. I did find that like at one point he had some T-shirts made, and it looked like he stole some artwork for those T-shirts. So that was kind of amusing. And then around 2012, I think he took a job with some company called Commune, which is like a small active sportswear type company. So it is actually some sort of apparel company, but it's not like a major brand. It's pretty low key, I guess. I don't know. But he legitimately had that job for, I don't know, maybe a year. And then he started at Lularoe. So I have no evidence that he ever worked for like any of these other companies. I think he had his denim brand, which was a small boutique type thing. And then he did this bike thing, which was not super successful. And then he worked for this sportswear company briefly, and then Lularoe. So that's Patrick's background as far as I was able to actually verify.
Well, I just Googled Red You're Dead to see what, and I guess it's Red YOU space R, just the letter R, dead.
See, they tried to play it off like that, but the original logo and stuff was like, it was just YOUR. Like,
I
all
see.
lowercase.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Then it's still a mystery.
Yeah. So, so now Patrick has he's doing his own thing. He's launched his own line. He's selling wholesale to a number of former Lularoe consultants. And if people like that clothing, good for them. He's kind of a controversial figure because people were the whole celebrity status thing was pretty stupid. Some people are really appreciative that he's actually testifying against Lularoe in court. But other people are hey, that's nice that he's testifying, but he was very much a part of this predatory company.
Right.
And he was part of the problem. It's still Mark and Deanne that are the big ones in charge, that are the big problem, but
Patrick saw everything that was happening and made seemingly zero effort to stop it or to help anyone else. He saw everything as he testified. He saw everything that was going on and wasn't like, hey, this is not okay. He just let it happen.
Yeah, because he was... we have no idea how much money he made. I don't think he made nearly as much as Mark and Deanne are paying themselves. But you got to assume he was doing pretty well, and he probably enjoyed the whole celebrity thing and all of that. So, Yeah, I would definitely, like, whatever Patrick does in the future, I would definitely take with a grain of salt and not assume that he's some kind of apparel genius. I mean, we'll see how his new stuff does. I've heard that I've heard some people like the jeans he's putting out. I mean, that's fine. If people actually like his stuff, that's fine. Good for them. My guess is it's going to be a lot of hype and maybe a little overhyped and overpriced for what it actually is. But we'll see.
Tell us about the product sitting outside the warehouse.
Yeah, so at one point, they just had so much product coming in and they did not have adequate warehouse space. And so they just started like stacking up all this stuff outside. But like it was getting rained on. I mean, it was in some kind of plastic, but it probably wasn't airtight. And
So
of course,
what
the
kind of
California
elements were these exposed to? Were all these clothes exposed to?
This is California in the summer, and so you're gonna have, like, even if they were in airtight plastic, there's gonna be moisture in the bag anyway. And then when you're sitting in direct sunlight and it's like, probably 100 degrees outside, and then it's way hotter in the direct sun, all of this moisture that's in the bag is gonna be like coming out of the clothing and then condensing, and not a good situation. You don't want to have massive amounts of clothing sitting outside for months on end, because when you bring it in, some of it's probably going to be moldy, and some of it's going to probably have like fading from where the sun hit it, and possibly, rodents could get into it, things like that.
Feral cats, cockroaches, anything.
Right.
Raccoons. Yeah.
So on top of the defective products and the horrible prints that consultants were getting, consultants started receiving clothing that smelled terrible. Some of it smelled moldy. Some of it smelled like cat piss. They received product that had like fading from the sun. There's also been claims about receiving products that look like mice had been in them. I mean, that sort of stuff.
Gross.
And yeah. And so we have actual like photos of the product being stored outside. Not only, I mean, there were people who visited the warehouse at that time and they saw it and took pictures. And we've also seen it on Google Earth. You could see like in their parking lot, just like all of these mountains of clothing. It was
And when
ridiculous.
if it's on Google Earth, it's been there for a while.
Right. Like, it's not likely that, it just was out for a week and then Google Earth happened to see it. Like, I mean, just the level of like mismanagement and disorganization, because at the time that this stuff was sitting out there, like they were like sold out, like consultants were wanting to order things that they couldn't buy. So, I mean, Lularoe just like had no inventory management skills. And, consultants want to buy, this size of leggings and they're sold out. They can't buy them. But how many were sitting in the parking lot?
And why weren't they being brought in? And oh my gosh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, we do believe that a number of consultants experienced health problems related to the mold. It's hard to prove. So I don't know if we're ever going to see anything come out of that, but
I was going to say, it sounds like another lawsuit.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, certainly anecdotally, like consultants would talk about the Lula flu and how like they would get sick, like, because they had a room full of Lularoe inventory and they're opening the boxes in there. And so there's no like fresh air. Like, I don't even know if it was just mold. Like, there could be other chemicals related to the manufacture of the clothing.
Or if they have any sort of allergies to, like, cats or rodents or mites that could be in the clothing from all these animals coming around.
Yeah. But yeah, we've definitely anecdotally heard from a lot of consultants who had health problems during their time with Lularoe. And then once they went out of business and they got rid of the stuff, they started feeling so much better. And they never really made the connection until we started finding all these pictures of this stuff sitting outside. And people had actual pictures of moldy product, but a lot of times I think the mold might not be visible or obvious, but it can still be there.
Right.
And so it's definitely,
yeah. That's true, like in your own home too, is you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know, I mean, if anyone is listening to this and they think this affected them, like, I would definitely encourage you to join Defective and search for this stuff and, you know, contact like Roberta or someone who's been posting about it, because I don't know what all they're doing behind the scenes.
I'll put a link in the show notes to the group so that people can access it easily.
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, I mean, you know, for consultants that they feel like their health has improved since they've gotten rid of their product, like, it's probably not in your head. Like, I really think there was actually something going on, and certainly mold can cause a lot of the symptoms that people were having. So, and if anybody still has a lot of product in their house and they've been having health problems, I would really encourage you to like move it out of your house if you can. Yeah, or try to move it as far away from you as possible, and just really try to go out of business as quickly as you can.
Burn it all down.
So one of the problems I think that's been happening, even though the product was being left outside, like, that's been some time now, as consultants have been returning their inventory and Lularoe has been buying it back from them, they've been shipping it right back out to retailers. And they denied this for a while. Like, they were publicly saying, like, no, we're not, you know, the inventory people return, we're not sending back out to consultants. And all these like Kool-Aid drinking consultants were totally believing that. And I was adamant, like, we knew that was a lie, because consultants were getting clothing that had like stickers and hole punches on the tags and stuff from other consultants. And so like, we knew that they've always been sending back out the returns. And so when it comes to the moldy clothing and stuff, it's possible that there's still stuff going out that is affected. Like, it's really hard to say. But the other issue is that there are like thousands of consultants who have sent their inventory back and they have not received their check yet. And we have people going back to like last March. Well, probably some that even sent back in February. I mean, I don't even know. There could be a few from even older than that. So Lularoe has this buyback program, and they approve you to send a certain amount back, and then they're supposed to cut you a check. But they keep delaying these checks indefinitely, and it's been a really long process. And unfortunately, I don't know if everyone's going to get it back. But I will say that it's unfortunate that it's kind of hard to prove whether or not they've actually sold what you personally sent back. But it's actually against the law. They cannot legally sell what you've sent them back until they pay for it. It's called theft by conversion. Right. It's called theft by conversion to like take something from someone and sell it and make that money and like not pay them for it. But I kind of suspect, like, based on inventory levels at the warehouse, I suspect that most of what has gone back has either been resold to consultants or been sold to liquidators or something. But I can't prove that. Like, I don't know. I'm not physically in their warehouse, but they owe so many people money that, like, there's no way they should be going out of stock on Carly's. Because you know that consultants returned like tens of thousands of Carly's, if not more. And I mean, they're claiming that they're going to get rid of some of this ugly stuff, but we keep seeing it going back in boxes. So
now, is Lularoe just really good at covering their tracks, and this is why you can't find stuff, or is it just so disorganized, like that it just makes it much harder? Like I don't understand. It's just, this is all just nuts when you hear it condensed into an hour and a half long podcast, you know?
Right. I mean, they're not a publicly traded company, so there's very little about their business operations that is subject to any kind of public records or scrutiny. And unfortunately, white collar crime is just very, very slow to get prosecuted. So even though like there's been so many reports to different government agencies and the California Attorney General and the FTC and like all of these groups, but getting them to actually do something typically takes years and years and years. I would encourage, I mean, we've been encouraging everyone all along, consultants, especially consultants, but even customers if they've had problems, file reports with your state attorney general's office, file a report with the California Attorney General's office. Even though in California it seems like they're not doing anything, it still does help to have that report filed, even if they just end up blowing you off. At some point, I just have to have faith that there's going to be some sort of accounting on that side of things. I don't know.
Something's got to give, I feel like it. Yeah.
And then also filing a report with the FTC. The FTC they don't really look that closely at individual reports, but they look at patterns. So that's where the more people who can file with the FTC, the better. They're not going to do anything for you individually, but having, 20,000 consultants filing a complaint versus like a few hundred is a big difference.
All right. This is what you've all been waiting for. This is the grand reveal. Many of you have already read the Business Insider article that's gone around, but we have a special treat for you. We've actually read the initial complaint, and believe you me, we're going to go over that for you in a fun and educational way. Right, ladies?
Yay! Right.
That was not very exciting, but anyway, so where do we start? Now, you guys are going to have to do a lot of explaining to me about stuff.
Right. Yeah.
and just work with me here.
So let's start with, well, we're not going to start with the beginning because the beginning is very boring. Like Becca already said, the defendants in this case are Mark, Deanne, and one of their children, Jordan. And Becca, you found it very humorous that Jordan specifically was named in this lawsuit. Why do you think that's particularly funny?
Yeah, and Lularoe is a defendant, to be clear, not just
right.
individually.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that Jordan is named in the suit. So Jordan is Deanne's son, and he works for Lularoe. Let's see, his official title, I forget off the top of my head. It's mentioned here somewhere. But Jordan's job is basically to be like rah 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 to people. Like he gets people pumped up at these leadership things.
He's the hype man. He's the flavor.
He is totally the hype man. He's the guy that's full of energy. Yeah, he'll put on leggings and a fanny pack and dance around on the stage and sing. But he doesn't seem to have a lot of like actual useful skills as far as I can tell. He kind of seems like a frat boy who gets everybody pumped up. So, yay.
Well, that's kind of what this says. It says individual defendant Jordan K. Brady is a promoter of the business opportunities offered by Lularoe. Since November 2014, Jordan Brady has served in a leadership and culture development role at Lularoe.
Yeah.
So that's kind of basically his job.
Yeah. So the reason he is getting sued is that he was on a training webinar where he stated, so he was explaining that the bonus checks were going to change from being based on the inventory they purchased, and they were going to change them to be based on what consultants were actually selling to end consumers. And so in part of this explanation, he stated, we need to get away from being a pyramid scheme. And then he stated again, so the way we get away from a pyramid scheme, just like stated publicly, we're a pyramid scheme.
Rule 1, never admit fault. That's like
right.
Everybody knows that.
It's like the that commercial that came out, fake commercial with the lawyers where they're like, when you get pulled over, shut the fuck up,
Oh my god, the best thing ever. Did you see that, Becca? It was like 2 lawyers in like California. Oh my god, it's hilarious.
What do you say when the cop first pulls you over?
Why'd you pull me over?
And when he keeps asking questions?
Not discussing my day.
And they ask more questions?
Am I being detained or am I free to go?
And if detained, what do you say?
I invoke the Fifth.
And then what do? You
shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up, Friday. Never answer questions when the cops ask.
Have safe holidays.
Tip of the day.
That's good advice.
No, I'm including it in the show
It
notes.
is good advice.
Yeah,
it's
for
amazing.
Sure. Educational
It's amazing.
PSA, guys. Shut the fuck up and
Shut the fuck up.
don't admit anything. Lawyer up, even if you're innocent.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the first claim.
Sure, definitely. And if anybody wants to read the entire complaint, just go to the Attorney General of Washington, go to their website and go to news releases. And in the press release for this, they actually have a link to what we're reading from. So if anybody wants to follow along at home, and I'm sure they'll put a link to that in the show notes, right, guys?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
So, and I guess as a little bit of background, this stuff gets confusing because the FTC has regulations that affect multi-level marketing companies and pyramid schemes. So there is some level of federal regulation about this, and you guys probably know more about that side of things than I do. But then each state can also make up their own laws that affect multi-level marketing companies. So, for example, the inventory buyback program, it's not something that's mandated at the federal level, but a number of states have laws about it. So any legitimate MLM company that has inventory, they're going to offer some sort of buyback program because so many states require it.
Right.
So in this lawsuit from the state of Washington, the first count is they are alleging that Lularoe is violating Washington state laws about pyramid schemes.
Oh my god,
so,
guys, can you hear the mower in the back?
Barely? Not
Can
really?
you?
Not really.
Okay,
No.
good. Sorry, I was gonna move to a different room if,
I can hear it when you're talking.
Sorry, guys, we're having some technical difficulties. That does not mean that this podcast won't be out or won't. The podcast is fine. It's just, I'm the one who's recording, Sasha, and it's everything from, like, my mic being muted, to things getting unplugged, to the list goes on and on and on. And then, right when I thought everything was done, we have a guy using his leaf blower outside my window. And it's like, why is this happening? Why is this happening during our Lularoe episode? Well, let me tell you, I think Deanne put a curse on us.
This is what we get for trying to record on a Saturday.
Oh yeah, no, it's Saturday, but it's also, we've recorded on Saturdays before, it's Deanne.
It's definitely Deanne.
It's Deanne. I'm gonna get my Ouija board out and see if I can... No, she's not dead. I'm cutting that out. But it's Deanne. I'm gonna sage this house down. Okay. Alright, let's kind of back up a little bit.
Okay, so the first thing that Washington is suing Lularoe for, they are alleging that Lularoe has violated Washington state law about being a pyramid scheme. And so there's kind of 3 main things that they're alleging. The first thing they're alleging is that you couldn't really make money with Lularoe unless you had a downline and you recruited other people. And Lularoe will certainly fight against that in court. I mean, there are consultants who made money back when the clothing was actually popular and people wanted to buy it. There were consultants who made money just selling the clothing, even without a downline. However, like, during this period of time when the bonuses were based on orders and not sales, all of the bonus checks that were being flaunted, they weren't sales checks. Those were bonus checks based on downlines, and all of the big numbers that were thrown out there about how much money people were making, all of that were based on downlines. Like, none of it was based on sales. So certainly Lularoe will try to counter this in court by saying, no, there was product, people were selling it. But I mean, Lularoe has admitted like they weren't really keeping data on how much people were selling versus how much they were buying. They didn't have good technology in place to track sales to the end consumer very well. So if Lularoe tries to really defend this in court, I'm not sure exactly how much data that they're actually going to have to support themselves.
Would you assume that maybe it's they didn't want to spend money for the software or somebody to analyze the software? Or do you think that they just didn't care? Or was it growing pains?
Probably kind of all of the above. They consistently failed to hire competent people for the jobs that they have. So there's definitely a lack of competence in the company. But also, I personally, it's my opinion that like it was always a scam. This was never about trying to really build a strong company that's going to last for a long time. I think they just wanted to make as much money as they could as fast as they could. And they got really, really lucky that they hit on a fad with the leggings. And, you know, Deanne's personality was like charming for a lot of people for a while. So I think part of it was just, I don't know, all of the above, I think is the answer.
It's like the Fire Festival of leggings.
Yes, there are so many similarities between that and Lularoe. When I first heard about, I haven't watched the documentaries yet, but when I first just heard about it, I was like, wow, that sounds like the Lularoe convention.
All we need is Ja Rule.
Right. Yeah, so the second reason they're alleging that Lularoe is a pyramid scheme is because they were pushing inventory loading. And so for a while, like, it was everything, the answer to all of your problems was always buying new inventory. And so that was their big thing, buy more, sell more. If sales are slow, you need to buy more inventory. And like never taking into account, you know, a consultant's ability to actually sell the product. And it was all made worse. They have very strict policies about you can't discount stuff. And so in a normal sales environment, you discount the old stock, you discount the stuff that's not selling so that you can move it out and bring in new stuff. But consultants are strictly prohibited from doing that. So their choice is to either try and sell it at full price or give it away. And there's like no middle ground. Or they can try to wholesale it to another consultant or trade inventory or something. But the consultants were really restricted from like doing the things that normal business owners do.
This sounds so complicated, Becca. Like, this sounds ridiculously complicated. Like, I need one of those maps with, like, all the yarn and, like business idea. Like,
we need a flow chart.
We need a flow chart. And a
right.
spreadsheet.
I mean, Lularoe would always tell these consultants, you're a small business owner, you own your own business. And yet they totally restrict them at every turn and prevent them from truly operating like a real business does. So pretty much the only things consultants had control over were like what poly mailers they buy, or, hey, am I going to upgrade this person to priority mail shipping? Like, I mean, they had control over small things like that, but the big things like, can I order quality prints that are going to sell? No, it's a mystery. You get whatever we send, and that sort of thing. And then the other big claim that Washington is making, there's been a lot of press about the buyback program, where if you decide to leave the business, we'll buy back your inventory. And it's a policy that Lularoe has that they've made a lot of changes to over the years. And so I mentioned like federal regulations before. Currently, there's no like federal law that requires MLMs to have a buyback program. It's more strongly encouraged at the federal level, but a number of states do require it, including Washington. And so like any legitimate MLM that has inventory should have some sort of buyback program because there are so many states that require it. So in Washington, it is required that if consultants leave the business, that Lularoe buy back their inventory. And there are some limitations to that. So it is supposed to be stuff that's purchased in the past year, which is of course super problematic because Lularoe doesn't have any way of knowing what you purchased in the past year. They also, in Washington law, it also basically says that they don't have to buy back seasonal items. So in Lularoe's case, they have these holiday capsules and stuff for like Halloween and Christmas and Valentine's, and they do a different one every year. So technically, they shouldn't have to buy those back because in theory, they can't resell those items. However, it's been really problematic because what Lularoe has done from time to time is put seasonal items in mainline orders. So if you're just ordering regular leggings and it's not part of a seasonal collection, you should be able to send that back to Lularoe if you quit the business. But Lularoe was sent it from time to time. They have sent out Americana and Christmas and Halloween leggings in a regular leggings order. But then when those consultants try to go out of business and send their stuff back, Lularoe's like, oh, we can't take that back. And that like totally violates the law. And I'm honestly not sure if the Attorney General's really going to get into that practice because it's kind of hard to prove. Like they would really need statements from a number of consultants and pictures and stuff. And because Lularoe doesn't keep records of exactly what's in your order in terms of prints and stuff, it gets a little tougher to prove in court.
I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep interrupting. I have this idea. Do you think that Lularoe purposely left out managing the inventory in what was each capsule or what was in each box that people ordered? So when shenanigans like this happens, they could be like, well, they can't prove it.
Oh, definitely. I think that it was intentional to not keep track of like prints and stuff like that. I think there's a reason behind it for sure. Yeah. And so the other thing that's problematic about Lularoe not buying back the seasonal stuff is over the past year, when they've done their seasonal launches, they've actually re-released the older stuff and sold it at a discount. And it's definitely possible that some of what they sold was product that people had returned that Lularoe refused to pay for because they considered it unsaleable, and then they turned around and sold it. So, but again, it's really hard to prove, okay, is this something someone returned or is it something that was just left over from last year? Except that those capsules had sold out the year before. So it doesn't make sense that they would have inventory like sitting around when something sold out.
But did it actually sell out?
Well, I mean, they are really incompetent, so it's always possible that like they thought it sold out, and then there was like another box sitting around the warehouse that nobody saw. I mean, that's the thing. There's so much, like, there's such a mix of incompetence and malfeasance that seems to be going around the company that it's sometimes just really hard to sell. So yeah, technically by Washington state law, they don't have to buy back the seasonal stuff. I think the Attorney General could make an argument that they should have, but that's not, honestly, like, that's not even really in the suit. That's just, there's a lot of nuances around the buyback program. But what is more black and white is like, you know, people would submit their resignation and say they want to send inventory back, and then Lularoe would really drag their feet on acknowledging that, and then they would try to say, oh, it's been more than a year, we don't have to take it back. But it's like, no, it's only been more than a year because you took 3 months to get back to me. Things like that. And then one of my favorite things about this lawsuit is that it mentions Lula math. And this is where consultants would submit, like, here's what I want to send back to the company for the buyback program. And then Lularoe would say, like, okay, here's what we're actually going to accept. Don't send back anything else because we're not going to pay you for it. And like the mathematical calculations they would use to come up with, like, it made no sense because basically they would look at everything you purchased in the past year and then they would subtract everything you sold in the past year. But for a lot of consultants, the things they sold in the past year were things purchased the year before that. And so they have inventory that they purchased in the past year that they want to return. Lularoe's not letting them return it because they're saying, oh, this isn't from the past year. Because again, this goes back to the problem of Lularoe not keeping track at all of what prints people are getting, or really much data at all about what's in the boxes.
What's in the box? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure that was common knowledge, but this is actually new to me that they just kept because I'm Katie and I are researching so many MLMs, and I thought I knew a lot about Lularoe, but I had no idea that they weren't that they were just basically like blindly tossing stuff into boxes, like when you're moving out of your dorm the last day before the semester ends.
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, and honestly, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, there was a time when consultants were getting like random stuff would fall into boxes. There was like a broom handle one time. There was an employee's name badge got in a box. There's been garbage in boxes.
I saw somebody the other day posted that there were like 4 praying mantises in their box.
They're praying for Deanne and Mark for their souls to be saved.
Yeah. Well, and one of the big issues that's been ongoing, and this is not part of the lawsuit, but it's just been an issue for the past few years, is consultants would order XYZ. And so you couldn't order the prints, but you could order what styles of clothing, like an Amelia dress or a maxi skirt or leggings. And you could pick what sizes. The lawsuit says you couldn't pick sizes, but I think they're referring to your onboarding order. But once you place new orders, you could pick sizes as long as what you wanted was in stock. But the prints are what you couldn't pick. So consultants would place an order, and every order there was a minimum number of pieces that you had to order. And so a lot of times they might only want like 10 items, but they'd have to order, I want to say it was maybe 30. So they'd order some stuff that maybe they didn't really want just to hit the minimum. But then when they would get their box, stuff would be missing, and they would get back order slips, or sometimes there wouldn't be one at all. And generally consultants have had a terrible time getting refunds or getting the product that they paid for and never received, because I think Lularoe has gone through various systems over the year of keeping track, but generally none of those systems seem to work. Like, I don't think there was really any keeping track of what was missing from the boxes.
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
Again, this is kind of a silly question, but sorry, I'm moving with my hands a lot today. I don't know, like a lot of clapping. I think I'm just excited for all this to be going down. Did anybody ever get, that you're aware of, just like an empty box with like maybe some recycled papers in it and trash? That's a very specific question, but I feel like given
that might have happened. There were definitely some where like they would order like 50 things and there'd be a box with like 1 or 2 things. I know there were some boxes with trash, and there was definitely speculation that like trash was just thrown in there to give it a weight for the shipping company and to make it look like they actually sent something.
But I don't understand when they have all these clothes with cats pissing on them outside. Like, where's all the clothes? Like, what? I don't know.
For a while, Deanne's son Alex was managing the warehouse, like during that period of time when product was being stored outside, and I suspect that he was in no way qualified to hold that position, and it was probably very badly managed.
Yeah. Because, when you're born into money, like, not that all people, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she's just been doing strange things her whole life. So anyway, the second count that Washington is alleging against Lularoe is misleading income claims. And so this has to do with the company and various consultants making claims about how much money they made, and especially the company. It sounds like kind of earlier in this filing, they quoted Deanne quite a bit. She doesn't do this anymore because I'm sure their lawyers like finally got it through her head to stop doing this. But based on what's in this lawsuit, she used to make very specific income claims about like how much money you can make selling Lularoe, which
and
you can't do that. Like, it's just super illegal.
This is what because Katie and I were reading over and she was explaining things to me, and because like I said, you guys are gonna have to dumb it down for me, but when she read that off to me, I knew that they were saying this, I did, but actually seeing it in black and white in a legal complaint,
right?
It would be a farce if it wasn't so devastating.
Yeah.
There's going to be a movie about this, and I wonder who's going to play Deanne. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that Washington State is suing Lularoe for, because, like, you can't do that. Like, this isn't like a salaried position where it's like, hey, come sell for us and we'll pay you this much per month. It was always a gamble. You couldn't pick. I mean, you just had no control over if you were going to get some really fashionable, desirable prints that people really wanted, or you were going to get this hideous geometric stuff where, like, someone just hit this random button in Photoshop and it randomly threw all these shapes all over the screen. Consultants had no control over that, and that had such a big impact on how sellable the clothes were. And just so many consultants received product that they couldn't sell, especially not at the prices that Lularoe was charging.
Absolutely. I mean, it was like a graphic artist sweatshop in there. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like I mentioned, like, in this accidentally got deleted, this part, but I mentioned in The Sims, like, if you want to get rich really quick, you hire a bunch of Sims to be your slaves, essentially, and you teach them how to paint, and you just make them paint every day, and then they sell their paintings because they become the next Picassos, and yeah, that's how you become incredibly, incredibly loaded in The Sims without using cheat codes. And so that's what Lularoe was doing, except theirs was terrible. There were no Picassos there.
Yeah. And so the third thing that Washington is suing Lularoe for is failure to disclose material terms in violation, which is similar to the previous thing. It's basically saying, that Lularoe made a big deal about all these people who were making money, which was true, that these people were actually making a lot of money for a period of time, but they weren't disclosing the tens of thousands of consultants that were losing money. And one of the things mentioned in the suit is that Lularoe they posted the 2016 like income distribution among the consultants that was like how many bonuses people were getting, but they never posted that for 2017, and the sales climate has changed quite a bit since then. So if you look at those 2016 numbers, like, that would not give you a good idea of what it's like to be a consultant today. The other thing one of the things they're alleging in relation to this is, like, the market became very oversaturated, and
oh yeah, I had a Lula bus on like every corner in my parents' neighborhood. Like,
yeah, and at some point, I mean, Lularoe actually changed their website, so if you wanted to look for consultants, it would only show you 5 consultants at once for any given area. So it was hiding like how many consultants were actually in your area.
Were those 5 consultants, like, were they like heavy hitters, or did it just random? I don't know if you know the answer to that. Would they just randomly generated?
It's supposed to be random. And the only thing about that is, like, they made that change relatively more recently. So most of the events alleged in this lawsuit are like 2016, early 2017, when Lularoe was just really like, hey, we're going to break all the laws as much as possible. The change to the consultant map, I feel like, kind of came a little bit later than that. So I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out in court, but there's so much in all this lawsuit. I'm not sure that that's really going to matter that much. But like, even today, I mean, there are still areas that are oversaturated, and especially as demand has decreased for Lularoe, you don't, in a small city, 20 consultants is going to be too much. Maybe when it was popular, that would have been a good number, but now that's not the case. But you can't, if you want to just see how many consultants are in my city, you don't have access to that data. And then they charge them with another violation of our state's Consumer Protection Act. It says means and instrumentalities. And that, again, just has to do with false and misleading representations. And so what Washington
I'm just... Well, the Deanne curse is upon us again. Our lovely co-host, Katie, has been a huge trooper through this episode, but her daughter was very, very sick, and as mothers tend to dote on their daughters when they're sick, Katie is just miserable. And she was real excited to do this episode because today's an exciting day. But I think she is going to depart. She's going to retire to her bedroom. Katie, you're still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
That's why you haven't heard a lot of Katie, and I've been trying. Yeah, because we have a little like private message thing off to the side if someone's like, I need to pee or something, and I'm just like, how are you feeling? And yeah,
I'm kind of just hanging in there.
And I keep telling Katie, like, you need to talk into the mic better. You need to talk into the mic better. And then like after the 5th time I said it, I was like, she's sick. Like, that's why she's not talking into the mic. So, please.
So I'm gonna leave you guys here and let you finish out the episode without me.
It's the Deanne curse. All right, no, let's all give Katie a round of applause. Oh well, you guys can't, but we're gonna send you good vibes. You know, just like Volo vibes.
I need those Volo vibes.
Those Volo vibes. That is an episode coming up, but I know we're talking about Lularoe. So, God, what else could possibly, like, is my house going to collapse on me during...
I'm sure that you'll finish off just fine.
Oh, God. I certainly hope so, or I'm going to find out none of this episode was recorded at all. So... Oh, Katie, go to bed.
Sorry,
Bye,
I didn't
Katie.
mute in time.
I love you, Katie.
And thank you for being on, Becca. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Katie, I'll check on you when I'm done recording.
Okay.
Unless you're sleeping, and then just don't respond to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
All right, bye. All right. So, Becca, continue.
Okay, so what Washington is asking the courts for, their prayer for relief, as it's called in the legal documents.
What is a prayer for relief?
That's basically what you're asking the courts to do. So you're filing this suit and you're saying, hey, this is a problem, and then you're saying this is the solution, which usually involves a lot of money. Money makes everything better, right?
Well, especially if you're Deanna and Mark.
Yeah. So the first thing that Washington is asking for is an injunction against Lularoe from breaking the law in all these ways. And I don't really see that part of it going anywhere because most of what they're talking about are practices that Lularoe no longer engages in, other than the issues that remain around the buyback program. Although what I will say is that consultants in Washington state have, because this investigation that led to this has been ongoing, there are still hundreds of consultants owed money from Lularoe because they sent their inventory back and Lularoe is supposed to buy it back from them. But consultants in Washington have been getting those refunds because of our state attorney general's office, because Lularoe was basically trying to avoid this lawsuit happening.
So what made Washington more on the ball than, like, any other states?
Yes, it's super exciting. We have a great attorney general's office. Bob Ferguson has been really aggressive about consumer protection, which is amazing. So if you're listening to this and you were a consultant in Washington state, if you have not at any point contacted the attorney general's office, I definitely recommend shooting them a note. You just do the file a complaint on their website, and you can I would just briefly say what your experiences were. But if Lularoe still owes you money and you're a former Washington consultant, like, I would definitely emphasize that, like, file a complaint and say that, because they can probably help you get that money, which I'm sure everyone would appreciate.
Or at least some of the money, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're asking for an injunction against Lularoe, which could, in theory, stop Lularoe from operating in the state of Washington. I don't see that happening because Lularoe has already changed some of their practices. But I don't know. I mean, anything is possible. I don't think they would put it in there for no reason. So, I mean, I think part of it is it's kind of a standard thing to include, but there's also probably some merit behind it if they have it in there. But the more relevant part are the financial penalties that they're asking for. They're asking for up to $2,000 per violation against Lularoe for every violation they're alleging.
So how much would that be? Like, that doesn't...
I have no idea.
I'm sorry, my chair is squeaking, guys. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know how they would calculate the number of violations. Like, I don't know if that's based on the number of consultants in Washington or the number of times Deanne made some ridiculous claim, which no one could even count that high.
Well, the Pharmacia, La Pharmacia, might do that to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that's going to, like, $2,000 per violation sounds like a low number, but I'm assuming whatever calculation they would use to calculate the number of violations would result in a substantial number. And then they are also asking the court to provide restitution in some form to the consultants. And so that potentially could also be a big number. And it's not clear to me if that would function kind of like a class action lawsuit where everyone who was ever a consultant in Washington would get a little bit of money. I'm not sure how it works in that context, but I do think that this is part of why I think it's helpful for anyone who's ever been a consultant in Washington to contact the Attorney General's office, because
Absolutely.
It's good for them. And we've been in Defective, we've been saying this for a few years now, it feels like. At least the past year, we've been really emphasizing that people need to contact their Attorney General's office. But the other thing is, like, if there is ever some sort of restitution, you're going to want the state to have your contact info and not be relying on some sort of list from Lularoe, because we know their record keeping is super amazing.
And I knew that it was just I have done a lot of reading about Lularoe, but this is like the first time that it's ever really dawned on me that it seems very intentional, because yeah, it may be illegal to not have your records up to date, but what's going to look worse in the grand scheme of when you're put on trial? It's going to be like, oh, you don't have proof of me doing that. And then you'll just get fined for not keeping your paperwork in order. That's what I'm assuming anyway.
Yeah, what we saw in the sales tax lawsuit was that Lularoe, they went back and forth several times, and Lularoe would state in court, like on the record, under the threat of perjury, oh, we have refunded everyone from a tax-free state that we owed sales tax money to, or whatever. Like, they would be like, and so they would submit numbers, like, we issued this number of $1 million in refunds, we've refunded everybody. And then I would post that in Defective, and I would be like, hey, if you're still owed a refund from a tax-free state, like, email Lularoe, email the sales tax, blah, 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 the emails that they had for this. And so many people would still comment, and they're like, no, I never got a refund. And then they went back and forth a few times in the lawsuit, and they're like, oh, we discovered additional people that needed to be refunded. And it's like, oh, okay, so you stated, like, under oath that you had refunded everybody, and now you're coming back and you're like, oh yeah, we found a few million more dollars in refunds that we needed to issue.
And somebody's their legal counsel is telling them, like, this is the best thing to say. I don't know how else they could say it, but oh my gosh.
Right. So just based on how they kept record, how great their record keeping was in that sales tax lawsuit, and we know that their numbers that they use for active consultants are always really fuzzy. And for example, there are a lot of former consultants who have formally resigned from the company. They've put in all the, submitted all the paperwork to resign. And then they'll keep getting emails as if they're an active consultant. So I've never trusted any of Lularoe's numbers about who is an active consultant based on the evidence that they don't seem to be keeping very good track. And they never state like what data they're using to consider someone active.
Right.
At one point, there was one point on a call where Mark said like X number of consultants sold over $500 this month or 5,000 or whatever. And then it's like, oh, okay, like this is an actual number with like context and reference.
You would trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like that's the only time I've ever heard like any kind of real number coming out of them. And there's so many consultants who go out of business quietly and they don't resign because they're worried about losing all the record keeping that's in Lularoe's system.
What record keeping?
Right. So I mean, even if Lularoe was keeping better records, even like accurate records aren't going to be that accurate because of the people who haven't actually resigned, or they're going out of business but they're still using Lularoe's payment system, which I don't recommend. Please don't use it.
Actually, I do have like something I noticed where you said they don't keep track of how many representatives they have in the company. I've been to the website quite a few times. Where it says find a Lula retailer, whatever jargon they call it, and like you go to the map of the United States. And it is lit up like a Christmas tree. And then I went, I went a year later, it's still lit up like a Christmas tree. And what I found very odd, on this map of the United States, the continental USA, there was one person apparently in Canada. How? I don't know. Is she smuggling Lula and Kinder Eggs? I don't know.
They did have. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly what was happening in Canada, but they did have some sort of agreement with a small number of consultants in Canada. They never fully launched in Canada. It was always like, oh, we're coming, we're going to launch in Canada, but they never did it on a big scale. It was always more like a beta testing type thing. I don't know anything about like Canadian regulations and how an MLM registers in Canada. So I don't know where they're at in that process.
But there was only one right next to the border. So I'm like,
yeah,
black market. I'm just joking around. I like the idea of like this black market, Lularoe,
right.
Kinder Egg, like let's go to the mattresses type of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think there was kind of a black market like in Hong Kong for a while. There were women over there who wanted Lularoe and would purchase it, and because consultants would be like, is it safe to ship to Hong Kong? And it's like, yes, right. It's safe to ship to Hong Kong.
Oh my gosh, Becca, if you can find anything on that for me, I would love to do some kind of like Lula trafficking episode. Right. I don't know, like a mini episode. I just feel like, we can get into some like nitty gritty, like cartel stuff. I don't know. I think it'd be fun. It'd be very, it'd be like Scarface, but instead of all the coke on the desk, you have a Lula room just covered in clothes that you don't know what to do with. And you know that you're stuck and you're fucked.
Yeah, I'll try to tag you on a post. I think the issue was Lularoe's payment system does not allow international orders. And so they would have to use PayPal or Square or something. And the active consultant, they don't like to go outside the system. And I think that was part of why they were suspicious. But from everything I've heard, like the customers were great customers. They always paid on time. They didn't file chargebacks or anything like that.
Well, they wanted their Lula.
Yeah, right.
Like they actually wanted, and it's definitely, supply and demand. Like when you can't get something, I don't need to tell you, but it already makes like third time I'm mentioning Kinder Eggs. God, I want like a real Kinder Egg here. Get on it, USA.
Right. Yeah, totally get it. Yeah, we have family in Germany, so I feel your pain.
We had a corner store that was selling them illegally that he got from Canada. That was a good summer. Good summer. Chocolate is terrible, but that's not bad. And I almost actually did eat almost one of the toys. But, I was an adult.
Like you do.
I was like 30 when this happened. Anyway, Lularoe.
Yeah, so to kind of sum up this lawsuit from Washington, so this is a big deal because it's actually the state of Washington suing Lularoe. Like, that doesn't happen every day. And it's not just some random person suing them. And so they're accusing them of being a pyramid scheme and false advertising, misleading claims, basically. So any former consultants listening to this, if you're not in Washington, if you haven't yet, file a complaint with your state attorney general's office. And I would even include a link to the press release on the Washington Attorney General Office's website. Tell your state, like, other states are suing Lularoe. Maybe you want to get in on this. I don't know. But the fact that one AG has filed this lawsuit could definitely show other AGs that, like, there's merit to all of these complaints that these women are making. Like, there's a lot going on here. So, yeah, so I really appreciate so much that I'm in Washington State and
hometown pride for Becca.
Yeah, it's so gratifying to have this happen. To have it be from my state is super cool. But yeah, it's just so nice that somebody actually finally listened to these women, and a few men too, and took them seriously. And this isn't just about people who didn't work their business hard enough. Like,
oh no,
there was actual, law breaking stuff going on. And I mean, it's been on so many levels. It's not just this pyramid scheme stuff, but yeah, it's really great to see this come through. And the other thing to keep in mind, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, these consultants tried to sue Lularoe for being a pyramid scheme, and because of the arbitration clause in their contract, they weren't able to do that. So it's nice. Lularoe does not have an arbitration clause with the state of Washington. So
do they in other states? Or do you
I don't think that's a thing. I don't.
Okay, I don't know.
That's
like, that's why I'm like, you have to walk me through this. Like, I am.
Yeah, they can't weasel out of this like they have some of their other lawsuits. Like, you have to take this stuff more seriously. I've looked at some of the other cases that our AG has filed, and it seems like a lot of times they result in settlements. Just because it costs a lot of money to defend yourself against these lawsuits, and you risk losing. And if you lose the lawsuit, then the judge is going to assess large penalties against you. So a lot of times companies will settle because that's going to be less money than losing the lawsuit. So I have no idea in this case. My guess is that Lularoe will fight it for a while. Just because, like, well, for many reasons. I mean, one, like, it's unusual to settle a lawsuit.
Yeah,
right?
that's
like,
been
usually you're going to defend yourself.
Sorry, let me have you restart, but I just want to be like, yes, this has been my burning question all day is, I've been waiting. Yeah, I mean, no, what I was about to ask is, how do you think this is going to go down? If you could hypothesize in somewhat educated guesses.
Sure. Yeah, so my hypothesis about how everything's going to go down, I'm still utterly convinced that at some point Lularoe's going to file for bankruptcy.
Oh, and so just to note on that, though, which is really, this is crazy, is we've actually recorded this episode over 2 separate days. We recorded the middle parts a couple weeks ago, and Becca, what was your because I had asked Becca, I said, where do you think Lularoe is going to go, and on what date did you say it was going to happen?
So my prediction was that they would file for bankruptcy yesterday. I'm honestly not 100% sure. Like, I don't have any evidence that has happened, but I'm also a little bit not sure if that would actually be posted to the website yet, because it might not get posted till Monday if they filed Friday. I'm not 100% sure. So I don't think, as far as I know, they have not filed yet. But I do think there'd be a little bit of a lag between them filing and us finding out. The main reason that I was thinking they would do that is because of some court dates coming up in the MyDyer case. But in that lawsuit, an amended complaint was filed, which is sort of vacated some of those initial hearings and pushed things back. So, I mean, it could be a few months. It's really hard to say.
But I just
really...
Yeah, just your intuition about the 25th. And so I was, like, looking through Lularoe, like news alerts, like, since the beginning of the morning, because I was like, I want to see if Becca hit the nail on the head. And instead it was like...
Oh, you're so funny.
I was like, what? And I said, today is the 25th. What? Like, it's just mind-boggling to me that, yeah, I mean, you have no idea, like, I had chills.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, definitely stuff was happening on the 25th. You know, who knows when this will go down, but Lularoe, like, the people who run Lularoe, it's just always been about the quick money grab. They don't seem like they would want to go through all this litigation and see it to the end at this point. They seem like they're pretty much financially insolvent. They have probably hundreds of millions of dollars in debts at this point between, I mean, they have unpaid taxes. They have all this stuff they owe MyDyer. They owe all this money to consultants. Like, we don't even know all the bills they have yet.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, so, and it would basically, in some ways, get them out of the lawsuits. And the other thing is they've really been grooming the consultants for a change. So they've been talking about rebranding Lularoe 2.0.
Oh, it's disgusting.
And, you know, we're getting rid of all that old inventory. We've gotten rid of our old designer. And all of that makes me think that they are focused on rebranding, which would be very consistent if they restructured under a bankruptcy. So I think at this point, if they did file and they filed, you know, a bankruptcy where you're going to restructure, I really think they would just basically tell the consultants, like, oh, well, all these bad people who filed the lawsuits against us, they're forcing us to do this. And, you know, it's fine. Like, look at all these companies who went through bankruptcy and they came out ahead.
No, and this is just, well, what I'm going to do right here is that we're going to take a quick bumper music break, just a quick break, and because I think it sounds like that we're wrapping up to, like, our big final thoughts, kind of, on, like, hitting the nail on the head. I want to save that good, juicy, poignant stuff. Can I start off by asking you a question?
Sure.
Do you think that, again, comparing it to Fire Festival, because if you said you haven't seen the documentaries yet, but you remember the whole hubbub, like,
yeah, I read some of the articles. I don't know.
The Vanity Fair, yeah, the Vanity Fair one is really good, guys. Really, really worth checking out. But do you think that Deanne and Mark had a Billy McFarland situation where it was basically always intended to be a scam, but they were really charismatic and really charming, and they knew how to lure people in and do what they wanted to do? Or do you think that they really just got in over their heads?
My personal opinion is that it was always a scam. I mean,
that's kind of what I was thinking, but yeah,
they definitely have a string of failed businesses behind them. Especially Mark. I mean, he ran several construction companies into the ground, and this is what we've seen and heard from people that knew them even before this. I mean, really, one of the funniest things about all of this with Lularoe is a few years ago, before the Defective group existed, back when, like, everything was unicorns and rainbow farts and everyone was making money and no one would ever say anything bad about the company. Unicorns have rainbow farts. That's what they fart rainbows.
Well, I know, like, what a unicorn is. Oh, okay, I see. You're not talking about unicorn leggings. You're talking about, like...
No, just everybody was saying, like, everything was amazing. Everyone was only saying
got it.
good
Yeah,
stuff.
Okay, got it. I got it.
So back then, somebody posted on Reddit, it was someone who appeared to know the family, and they said on there, it's all a scam. This family has a long history of scamming people, and they listed a bunch of, like, things they'd been connected with. They mentioned Yo Gabba Gabba, which is Justin used to be involved with that show.
What,
they mentioned the
he
Jets.
Was? I liked
Yes,
Yo
he
Gabba
was...
Gabba as an adult. I did. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think he kind of overplays his involvement. I think he helped with the show in, like, the first season or two.
He was part of the craft table.
Sam Schultz's brother was, like, the main person. But yeah, Justin has an entertainment background. There's some sort of connection. I want to say, like, anyway, I won't get into it, but there was a thing posted on Reddit, and it sounded so ridiculous, and everything that was in it has turned out to be true. And so I think that's really funny today. But yeah, and basically what they were saying on Reddit is that it's all a scam. And from the conversations that we have had with, like, family members and people that have known them before Lularoe, they think there was always an intention to just make the money and run. And honestly, I think Mark and Deanne got lucky that things blew up as big as they did and they made as much money as they did. I don't think they could have even dreamed at the beginning that they ever would have made so much money
after only 6 years.
Yeah, but it's just so sad because there really was the potential for it to legitimately be a good company, or even if you're going to be an MLM, which is kind of scammy.
Yeah, I was about to say, not a good company, but at least someone practicing, not active. Well, I mean, that's a hard thing to say, but it's like Lularoe is definitely one of the scummiest. And
yeah.
And like Courtney talked about on our second Lularoe episode, back in our archives, like, just the amount of drug use and body shaming and manipulation and just manipulation between marriage partners. They're evil. They are evil.
Yeah.
And I am not, like, they are evil, and they know that they're hurting people just so that they can run away with what? As they say in Fargo, at the end of Fargo, and for what? Just a little bit of money?
Yeah, it's really sad because I mean, yeah, I think they could have. Mark has talked a lot about being a small business incubator, which is a total joke because at no point do they ever give any actual business advice other than one time Mark suggested that people hire a real tax person instead of using TurboTax, and I was like, that's actually good advice. Mark is right about something for the first time ever. Like,
well,
there's should not use TurboTax.
God, even a broken clock is right at least one time a day,
Yeah, definitely. So, but it's kind of unfortunate because honestly, like, they could have used their platform to talk about shipping. Because I run a Facebook group about shipping, and most of these consultants, like, for example, from their uplines, they were not getting good advice about how to ship things in the most cost efficient way. There's various, like, legitimate business things that at a minimum, like, at least they could have been giving good advice about that. And if they'd actually had quality clothing and quality prints, it could have been kind of a fun little side gig for some people if you just took the more predatory practices out of it.
Well, especially they had a very, very good niche, which we've talked about in a lot of episodes, and I think even earlier in this episode, that they were giving, at that time, cute clothing, cute leggings, cute dresses for LDS women that actually were, I mean, of course, some of the prints have always been bad, but at least in the beginning, from my understanding, cute stuff. And they were also offering some stuff for, for plus size women. They were really trying to just be like, look, you can be beautiful. You can feel good. And that's all you need is a message to suck them in.
Yeah, it's really sad because I do think there was some really positive stuff coming, especially from I really think it was mostly consultants more than the company that were pushing this body positivity and, like, making customers feel good.
It had to start from somewhere.
Yeah, there's been some amazing consultants who truly were doing good stuff and having a positive impact on people. And I guess that's part of what makes me sad about this is that, women with really good intentions who they weren't just trying to make a quick buck. They loved selling clothing. They loved making their customers feel good. I mean, of course they like making money, but it was more than that. Like they were doing it. There were a lot of consultants that did it because they genuinely loved it and not just for making money, which I mean, it's fine if you were just doing it to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But it makes me sad that they were manipulated and lied to by Mark and Deanne and just taken advantage of.
And that's why Katie and I, in every single episode, I feel like at this point, we get so angry when people are intentionally mean to people who are, who are relatively nice, sliding into their DMs, unless they're being a bitch, then be a bitch back. But, or people saying, oh, all Huns are stupid, MLM reps are stupid. They're not. And they really, most of them are not trying to scam you.
Yeah, and really with Lularoe, I mean, a lot of women sold Lularoe who would never join an MLM and have never joined one since. I mean, I know some people have bounced around to other MLMs since then, but it attracted a number of business-minded women saw it. The clothing was popular, and it seemed like a solid business model. I mean, even if you take all of the downline and upline stuff out of it, it was popular clothing, and having the mystery prints was exciting, and it created excitement from the customers. And if they had just had decent prints and decent quality, a lot of those women really could have been successful with it. But that's the thing, they just wanted to make a quick buck, so they weren't willing to invest in designers, invest in artwork, and so people got garbage and they lost a lot of money. Invest
in healthy warehouse conditions, nothing. I'm gonna talk about Fire Festival one more time, and that's because my followers who follow me on my Facebook page, I was making a lot of can someone tweet a drool so that I can get to Fire Festival 19? And then the 2 documentaries came out. So I was like, oh, perfect timing. But Fire Festival, when I heard about it, it was hysterical. It was how could something turn into this much of a clusterfuck? But then you watch, especially the Netflix documentary, I'm not giving you any spoilers, but so many people on Exuma lost a ridiculous amount of money in a town that is already very economically depressed. People's livelihoods were ruined. Their savings were gone. And and even not just talking about that, but even rich kids on the island, everyone's like, rich kids on the island. It's no, it was terrifying. There was no security. Anyway, it was a bad time. It was unsafe. People lost a lot of money, etc. But yeah, it's really funny on the outside. It's really hard not to laugh about it. I'm sorry. But then you look at Lularoe, and it's just every month something. It's like a farce where, it was oh, we're coming out with an all-black clothing line. Oh, I think that my black shirt may have been re-dyed from a different shirt. The whole, oh gosh, the Down syndrome thing, and just, it's like you're looking at this, and it's like a car crash you can't look away from, but then you look deep inside, and you see especially look at, our first 2 Lularoe episodes we did. I think that they're the first 2, that are actually in our archives, first 2 episodes. And that family, I don't have the words. They have ruined so many people.
Yeah.
So
it's really sad.
So I'm gonna wrap this up, but I have 2 very short questions for you.
Sure.
Kind of to end it on a lighter note than how much I hate Deanna and Mark. One, you know that there's going to be a movie about this. You know, I mean, nothing's in the works, but I'm talking about in the future. Who would you cast to play Deanne?
I never see movies. But
well, I'll tell you mine.
Who was okay, you tell me yours first. Okay, I've got it. You tell me yours.
Jessica Lange. From American Horror Story, and she can act really crazy and really bugged out eyes. I think she need blue contacts. But I'd go with
Christina Applegate.
Oh no, especially how old is she now? Because it depends when the movie comes out.
She's 47. She's 47 now, so I mean, Deanne is obviously older than her. But I will say, one of the Business Insider articles had a picture of Deanne, and it was kind of just photoshopped into something else. But I thought she looked a lot like Christina Applegate. It was actually one of the more flattering photos of Deanne.
Well, she probably wasn't. Her eyes probably weren't the size of pinpricks.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I don't really know actors and actresses that well.
No,
I do think Christina Applegate kind of looks like a younger Deanne.
She does.
Especially if you were going to shoot Deanne years ago, What she always talks about being, I've been in the industry for 27 years or 37 years. She just throws random numbers out there. So
no, but let's say
if you were going to shoot her from back then.
Let's say this movie starts getting going in 5-10 years. They can always make her up to make her look older, or sometimes in general for roles like this, they just go ahead and cast a younger, beautiful actress anyway, because that's you gotta cater to the male gaze. It happens. Well, no, I think I'm not going to ask you about Mark or any of the other people, although Jordan would be an interesting person to cast. Get at us for your future Lularoe cast, because I want this movie to be made, and we gotta talk to Christina Applegate's agent. And my last burning, yearning question for you.
Okay,
well, actually two.
Okay.
Since you are in Washington, could you pretty please go to every single trial with a little press pass? We can give you sounds like MLM, but okay, press pass, and you can be our official legal analyst on the show, and we can be and we're tuning in from, and you can be outside the courthouse, and we can Skype with you, and you're hi Sasha and Katie, I'm here, and it's you think you could do that?
That would be super fun. I really doubt it's ever going to go to trial, but if it goes to trial, I would definitely be interested in going. I live on a small island that's up near Canada, so going to stuff is often easier said than done. But my parents are in Seattle, and if there was a trial, it would be in Seattle. So,
oh my gosh,
yes, my answer is yes.
My uncles,
if there is a trial, I'll go.
My uncle is in Seattle. We could do a whole we could get a news truck out there, which would be my uncle's Lexus SUV, and we could. Oh, that would be a good time. Okay, finally, the last question. I promise this is it. Very last one. What do you think is going to happen to Courtney's cow rug? People are asking.
I think it's in the ranch in Wyoming. Deanne has 10 cow rugs there. I think she just took all of them and put them in her Wyoming ranch, and then she does live shots from there and shows how many cow rugs she has, probably to passive aggressively rub it in Courtney's face. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Becca. Have a good day.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.
You fuck with the money, oh, you'll be sorry. You fuck with the money, oh, you'll be sorry. You got what you wanted, oh, you got what you wanted. I did what you told me, oh, I did what you told me. You fuck with my money, oh.
Well, welcome back, guys. We've recorded this episode over a 3-day period because, one, we recorded the first part before we were just talking about the lawsuits. It was before the pyramid scheme allegations came up. 2, we decided to record about the pyramid scheme stuff because, it was relevant. And, 3, it is currently Tuesday nights. at 8 p.m. on Tuesday here in California. I have to get this episode out by tomorrow morning, but something really ridiculous happened in Lularoe land that is just, it is just too much of a farce to not mention. So, today, at the last minute, tonight, I contacted our friend Heather, who is a admin over at the Lularoe Defective group, which, like I said, I'll put the link in the show notes. So, Heather, hi, how you doing?
Good, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you, because I literally messaged her, like, half an hour ago, and I was like, we need to talk about this. This is going to be fantastic. Heather, so you know a lot about Lularoe. You're an admin in Defective, so this is kind of like your thing to talk about. like, I would call you a Lularoe expert, essentially. Okay, so Friday was when the complaint was filed for Lularoe being a pyramid scheme. Saturday, as in a few days ago, the day after the complaint was filed, it was Deanne's 60th birthday. And you'd think, okay, well, you know, she probably just had kind of a small thing, and no. So Becca posted this ridiculous Business Insider article. Now, let's remember that Business Insider was also, they were also the people to break the story on the pyramid scheme allegations. So I think it's fitting that they should also talk about Deanne's birthday. Heather, what did you think when you first read this article?
You know, I wanted to be surprised, but seeing how much they kind of like to show off even when things are really, really bad, or it would be really bad press move, in my opinion, they just seem to go bigger. Now, this party is kind of a step back from last year's. They had the whole, I don't know if you remember, her party last year on the yacht.
No, actually, I don't.
Yeah, so
could you explain that?
Yeah, last year she had a huge party on a yacht, and they had, you know, family and the top consultants and mentors, and they had this floating party. I think, if I remember correctly, it was also after a lawsuit, but when don't they have new lawsuits breaking?
No, it's literally like it's literally every day. She could be. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. When I was reading the article, because I didn't even see photos, I wasn't paying attention, and she blocked me from her Instagram, so I don't get to see all the pretty pictures. But reading it, I was actually surprised, even at her level of narcissism. She passed out cardboard masks with her face printed on them.
Oh my, okay, all right, but I want to go back into that in just a second, but sorry, I'm going to be laughing throughout this entire segment and probably blowing out my mic, and audio will be clipping, and I'm sorry about that, but the theme of the party, which I know you said it's a step back from the yacht and everything, but the theme of the party is masquerade, and throughout history, at least, you know, way back in the day, masquerade has a certain connotation where it was for the wealthy to party and hide behind a mask, hide their identity, so that they could say what they wanted to freely. And so it's in poor taste that she would choose, I mean, I'm sure it was already planned, but to continue on to have this party, given what just happened the day before. Now, so, you know, there's masks and everything. Again, tell me about this Deanne mask?
Yeah, apparently, beyond people bringing their own costumes, she had masks, or someone had masks with her face on them, which I guess she wants to look at herself all night.
You know, it kind of reminds me of when I went to Coachella in 2011. There were a few people with Gary Busey masks, but I feel like that is a little different. So, because it wasn't Gary Busey past, maybe it was, I don't know. Maybe he was at Coachella too, just, rolling his balls off. So let's get into the article, because there are some really, really just jaw-dropping, although this whole episode is jaw-dropping, things about it. Article starts off as saying this was a masquerade-themed event that took place at the Mission Inn Hotel and Spa, which is a very bougie place to have an event. It has hosted U.S. presidents, Hollywood stars, and luminaries. Oh, I'm just reading from the article, and apparently Amelia Earhart, Helen Keller, and Albert Einstein over the decades. That has a lot of cachet. I'm really impressed by that. So it's really expensive to have a private party here, as you would imagine. Now, we don't really know how many people attended this event. Heather, do you know? Like, was it just family? Was it retailers? Was it, like, who do you think was on the guest list?
Well, I mean, we don't know for sure, but based on photos that have been shared and tagged, definitely family and some of the top mentors. I haven't looked at all the tags, but I'm sure that's an easy way to find out some of the people who are there with more public accounts.
And some of those hashtags are ludicrous. Like, when I was reading this article, I was like, really? So they're all wearing their, very outrageous, very flamboyant masquerade masks. And they're all, like, hanging out in the courtyard, having a good time. And above the crowd, you have acrobats doing some, like, acro yoga.
Yeah, the aerialists.
Exactly, yes. It's just like, Lularoe is already a circus. Do we really have to,
I think my favorite hashtag is the "You Can Sit With Us." That one's pretty funny.
Oh my god, that was a hashtag? I totally...
Yeah, hashtag "You Can Sit With Us."
No. Oh, that is...
Nod to the mean girls.
She is a mean girl. In fact, no. I think that Regina George has more self-awareness than Deanne does. Other partygoers documented the night by modeling before the on-site chapel altar. Yes, there is a like, why are they partying in a chapel?
It's gilded with 18 karat gold. Like, this is not just, like, a normal chapel in a hotel.
Right. I didn't even
this
know
is
they
extravagant.
I don't think I've ever stayed in a hotel with a chapel.
No.
Although I don't stay at, well, anyway. Gilded with 18 karat gold leaf, exactly what Heather said, or in the courtyard beside a small statue of St. Francis Assisi, the patron saint of merchants.
That's my absolute favorite part. I want to know if they planned that, if the party planner thought that would be a fun nod, but the first thing I thought of was, were they praying for mercy from Bob Ferguson? Like, what was their motivation? Like, that's just too great.
She was also regaled with an approximately 7-minute dance routine performed by her children and their spouses, according to a video viewed by Business Insider. Like, this sounds like a debutante ball.
And the music choice is interesting for a 60th birthday. Not that I'm judging, but it's interesting for a 60-year-old Mormon.
I can't think of anything more...
I mean, seeing this group of women, I'm assuming they wore Lularoe. I haven't looked at all the pictures, but I just picture a whole group of men and women, head to toe Lularoe, maybe some Lula suits, dancing off to 50 cents into club.
Bedazzled Lula suits. All wear... Oh, and you know what? Because it's their birthday, I bet they were all wearing that hideous Deanne skirt.
Oh my
gosh,
accordion the elegant
thing. Oh my god.
Looks like a cupcake liner.
Yeah, those ones that you get at the store when you don't have a cupcake pan,
little foil liner.
Yeah, exactly. With her children and their spouses dancing for her, I feel like it's a situation where she's like, dance, monkey, dance.
Where she's like holding court. I mean, they called her the queen of Lularoe, and that's pretty much what she was doing. She was holding court.
As Heather mentioned, they were dancing to In the Club, which, I mean, makes sense because it's like, go shorty, it's your birthday. We're gonna party like it's your birthday. But then it goes into like, and we don't give a fuck, it's not your birthday. Like, what? Oh my gosh. Deanne said at the conclusion of the performance, according to a video reviewed by Business Insider, "I can't believe it. Whose fault was this?" On Instagram, Lularoe retailers also posted photos of themselves wearing red, Deanne's favorite color, marked with the hashtags #LLRBirthdaySquad and #LLRSquadLife in honor of the founder. Now, I want to mention real quick that I find this particularly funny because there is a Edgar Allan Poe story about a masquerade, and it's called The Mask of the Red Death.
Oh my gosh, I totally didn't even go to that. That's too perfect.
Like, this is just so satirically poetic. I feel like Jonathan Swift wrote this. On Sunday, we wear red to honor the Queen of Lularoe, read one post, which Deanne subsequently shared on her Instagram story. What the fuck?
I think another hashtag on another post was a little bit more fitting for Deanne. #Ice Queen.
Oh, who, why did they hashtag the Ice Queen? Was that a anti-Lularoe person?
No, it's, I don't want to say their Instagram handle here, but no, it's definitely someone who was a guest.
Oh, that is so... Oh, God. The founder also got in on the trend, filming an Instagram live video in her office on Sunday, but she already had a party on Saturday. The workplace had been decorated in pink, white, and gold balloons and streamers. "I guess that's what we have to do to celebrate the day," she said, according to a video reviewed by Business Insider. "Look at this. I'm not kidding you. These guys, they put a lot of work into this. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all my amazing people here at the office."
Well, at least that sounds like she might be a little bit self-aware. I guess that's what we have to do. We have to celebrate. Maybe she was feeling that lawsuit a little bit.
She was probably on Xanax that entire time.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
I'd like to see that video and check her pupil size.
Oh, I know. That is one of my favorite parts about looking at her videos, is like, I'm trying to figure out what high is she on? Like, what drug has she taken? I'm like, is that an opiate? Is that
Are we up or down
Xanny?
today?
Yeah, are we up or are we down today? Are those some bennies? On January 28th, the company posted a birthday message to its founder on Instagram. "Each and every day, you strive to make everyone feel loved and appreciated." And then you also destroy their homes and their families. And
Yeah, I'm sure some refunds would make some of the ex-retailers feel loved and appreciated.
Exactly, yeah. The birthday...
They're still on March 5th, last I heard, of last year, for refunds. Hasn't moved in weeks.
Oh my gosh!
If not months, actually.
I don't even know what to say to that.
And there's actually a woman who said she's due her refund from 2017. We asked her to reach out to her state attorney general's office and some other resources to try and follow up on that, but there's definitely still a few stragglers from before.
And again, like Becca said in the previous segments, please reach out. The more people who reach out to their attorney general's office, there's power in numbers. I just want to put that out there again.
Yeah, and I do feel like we're kind of beating a dead horse, but it really does help, even if it doesn't seem like it. I'm sure it's exactly the same thing people have been told a million times and they're tired of hearing about it, but really it does. It makes a difference.
And even if you may never get your refund, you do have an opportunity to bring Mark and Deanne to justice. And
exactly.
Yeah. Like we said, this birthday celebration came just the day after her pyramid scheme allegations. If she wanted to be a queen for her birthday, maybe she should have been like Cleopatra, do some pyramid-themed birthday party. Yeah, no, I think that would have been much more fitting. And then they could have played the, her children could have danced to, instead of Into Club, they could have done Steve Martin's SNL sketch from back in the 70s, King Tut, when the whole King Tut fad was going on. That would have been much better.
Now when he was a young man, he never thought he'd see people stand in line to see the boy king. How'd you get so funky? Did you do the monkey? Born in Arizona, moved to Babylonia.
Much more fitting.
It would have been much more fitting. Or, what's that Bengals song called? Yeah, Walk Like an Egyptian, and it'd be great. Anyway, moving on from, what could have been a more fitting theme than Masquerade.
And I do love that to tie up her birthday celebration article, they remind that Washington Attorney General did just file a lawsuit against Lularoe, alleging that they're an illegal pyramid scheme. And they do touch on the numerous shell companies that Lularoe has been found in connection with, that some believe that they're hiding assets in.
What do you mean by shell companies?
Just numerous LLCs that aren't necessarily connected to Lularoe directly, but are linked to Mark or the other family members.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but like money laundering?
Possibly. I mean, anything that we say is just speculation. But,
right. It's all just speculation.
There's properties. There's properties, there's homes, the jets, the cars. Everything seems to be kind of listed under different LLCs rather than by Mark and Deanne's names or Lularoe. It's sort of spread out. Share the wealth, I guess.
And again, I'm just speculating and kind of joking, but what if Mark and Deanne are part of some, like, Lula Mafia?
Well, they apparently already have their out plan. He said he will take his money and go to the Bahamas and fuck everyone else, right?
Right. They're gonna go to the mattresses with Bob Ferguson. Like, they're ready to go. Just thinking about Mark as, like, the godfather.
I don't know, I think Deanne might be.
Oh, I think you're right. I think Deanne
I think
is
she
the
might wear
godfather.
the pants. Yeah, I think she's pulling the strings. A lot of people think it's Mark, but I have my reasons to suspect that Deanne knows more than she puts on.
I think you're probably right. I feel like she is the ringleader of this whole operation, and not that Mark has, is free of guilt with any of this, but I feel like when you look at their lives together, it always seems like she starts the live out, and then she's almost kind of setting up what Mark should say.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get that feeling?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think, I think you're right about that.
I think she plays innocent a little too hard.
Well, of course.
Mark does like to hear himself speak, but
oh no, of course he does. But I do feel like Deanne is the HBIC head bitch in charge. So before we wrap this up, this is going to be our longest episode ever. So I hope you guys have a long commute and you're in traffic, or there's a lot to clean around your house. I feel like people are ready for a Lularoe French Revolution.
Oh, absolutely. It's time.
It's time.
We've been watching them flaunt their cars, their travel.
I mean, there are so many events in history where this is the beginning of an uprising. So, it's like the French Revolution
complete with leggings.
Complete with leggings, with French bulldog leggings, which I believe were unicorns.
Hatshepsut, she may have been killed by her stepson, which I would like to tie to Mr. Lyons.
Ooh. But now we're getting pretty esoteric now. Like, people are going to be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Him and starting supply store. He tried to sell things out from under Deanne without her knowing, and opened a supply store. And made money off of sales there until they discovered it.
No, I could definitely see the similarities there, but I just
reaching pretty far.
But no, I just thought of a really good pun because the consultants. I think that there might be an uprising. I think that there will be Lularoe revolution, or I like to call a revolution. Oh man, I gotta get that hashtag going. It's kind of like Occupy Wall Street. It can be like hashtag Occupy Lularoe, hashtag revolution.
I think it works.
I think it works too. I think we've covered everything there is to say about Deanne's birthday.
Until the next scandal.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts?
No.
Yeah, I don't either. What else can you say?
I need a break.
Yeah. All right, I want to give huge thanks to Heather for coming on at the very, very last minute. I am going to have to take an Adderall and be up all night, making sure I get this out for you guys on Wednesday. It's just been one thing after another. Like I said, this is the third day that we've had to record something.
Yeah, and I think today alone there were 3 or 4 articles that were published with different things to do with Lularoe, so it's been a really busy news day in Lulaland.
I like how there's somebody at Business Insider who's just, I am so done with Lularoe, and like they covered the birthday party. Like, why would Business Insider want to cover Deanne's birthday party? Except someone there is really pissed about this situation. Yeah. We will be right back. We will wrap things up, I hope. And I hope I won't have to record another segment tonight.
We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run.
Well, here we are. That was quite an episode. We've put countless hours into this one, and we certainly hope that you enjoyed it. There was quite a lot of information to sort through, and we condensed it as efficiently and effectively as we could while still giving you that steaming hot tea that you deserve. It's just like this whole debacle is a farce. It's like watching some hybrid of The Godfather and It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, because this whole thing is just so absurd, but it's also so horrifically tragic for those who lost everything. So, and on that note, it is just such a weird situation. And hey, I don't thank these people enough, but we have a great advisory team, which includes Summer Sanders, who has been a guest on the show before. You might remember her from the Halloween episode, and Ashley Walls. And because this podcast has grown so suddenly, we've added a few more members. I want to introduce Jessica Andrews, Caroline Thompson, who will be helping me with some of the basics of the audio editing, and Holly Norris, who is also a admin over at Sounds Like MLM, but okay, who will help take charge of the Patreon. On that note, now that we have a full-blown team and people managing different aspects of this project, I need to give a huge shout-out to Sarah Reese, who has thrown her money at us to give her a shout-out. So Sarah, we love you, and thank you for saying such nice things about the podcast that we did. We will never ignore you again, and we'll never give up on you or hurt you. So, this one goes out to you.
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you, never gonna make you cry, never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie and hurt you.
If you want a shout out like this, go to our website, SLMLM, but okay, and click on our Patreon link. All of our social media is also on the website, the Twitter, our Facebook page, the Facebook group that Katie admins that has 85,000 people in it, so I guarantee you're going to make a friend or two. If you don't want to make a friend or two, that's fine. Just go ahead and lurk. Has our Instagram on it, and quite frankly, some really awesome merchandise. Also, I want to say again, please check out the Defective group. There are so many things. If they get the first scoop on anything Lularoe related, they will break the news for you. There are some fantastic and knowledgeable people who just spend a lot of their time researching Lularoe, and it is definitely worth adding it to your Facebook groups. Again, I want to thank Becca, and I want to thank Heather for giving me their time today. Whew, this was quite a production, and I have been up all night doing this episode because it was just one thing after another came up with Lularoe, and I just had to keep adding it. Tuesday night, getting it out. Well, on Wednesday, I hope that you guys enjoy this. We'll see you next week, and hopefully Katie will be feeling better. Always read the fine print, don't get scammed, and Lularoe, let's face it, their jig is up.
Don't sing if you want to live long. They have no use for your song. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead and out of this world.
Amazing sense of security that Lularoe is here to stay. It will continue to grow and it will continue to move forward.
You'll never get a second chance. Plan all your moves in advance. Stay dead, stay dead, stay dead, stay dead and out of this world.
I've heard some whining lately also about, well, my inventory's stale. No, you're stale. Your customers are stale. Get out and find new customers.
Run fast, don't stand in the sun. There's too much work to be done. You're down, you're down, you're down, you're down and out of this world.
And I will tell you, if it's not making you money, get off of it.